Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у щах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1159 of the War News stream. And today we have massive news that North Korea has officially entered the Ukraine war in official capacity, and that is a major development today. We've also seen that Pakistan and India are sending mass deployments of equipment to their borders, even more than before, and Israel has committed as of today to strike Iran's nuclear sites, departing from U.S. advice. We have big news today, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we've been able to hear significant news from multiple different areas, quite literally throughout the stretch of Europe and Asia, as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea today, through the North Korean-Russian Treaty of Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, has invoked Article 4 of the treaty, thus officially declaring war on the state of Ukraine, and officially, by all capacities, entering the war in Ukraine on the side of the Russian Federation as an active belligerent of the conflict. This is the first time that any third-party country has officially entered the conflict by any means, either in support of Ukraine or the Russian Federation, throughout the entirety of the war. We will be covering that here a little bit more in a second, but there has been major developments coming from quite literally around the world, as we have been able to hear in further developments in between India and Pakistan that experts and analysts are now stating that the border war right now currently happening between India and Pakistan is going to evolve into a full-scale total war within days, as it appears that the Republic of India is poised to strike at Pakistan at a full-scale military response here within only days. Meanwhile, the Pakistani armed forces have been moving at rapid speed to get to the border regions of India as fast as physically possible. with dozens of military trains seen today moving their equipment into position, and also large tank forces already being seen near to the area of the Punjab province of the Republic of India. At the exact same time, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan's Air Force has been mobilized today and has been conducting sorties near to the area of the Lipa Valley, where border skirmishes have been going on heavily since several days ago, and we have also been able to hear that the People's Republic of China has now come out in official support for the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, stating that they are in their support of their sovereign interests and may provide some support to Pakistan in the midst of this conflict, furthering the division between the People's Republic of China and the Republic of India, which has already begun to wane in prior years. Meanwhile, inside the Middle East, we have been able to hear that the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States of America have been able to make almost no common ground whatsoever on the provisions of a nuclear treaty, as many who are involved currently inside of the nuclear negotiations are stating that Woodcock and the Iranians are still above 30,000 feet on the actual details of a denuclearization treaty, meaning that they have made absolutely no ground whatsoever. In the meantime, Netanyahu has decided that Israel cannot wait and has vowed that the Israelis will attack Iran here in the very near future, destroying and completely crippling Iranian nuclear research and development sites and the ability for the Islamic Republic of Iran to ever produce a nuclear weapon that could threaten the state of Israel, the Middle East at large, or even the United States here in the distant future. Meanwhile, the Israelis have already started up their strikes against Iranian proxies inside the areas of Lebanon and the Gaza Strip, as Israeli air forces did conduct a significant air campaign today within the Dayat suburb of southern Beirut, once again attacking and targeting significant arms caches of Hezbollah forces and also meeting areas. At the exact same time, the United States Armed Forces have conducted a successful attack today near to the area of Issa Ra inside of the Western-controlled Houthi Yemen area of Yemen, and it appears that the United States Armed Forces are still gearing up in preparation for a possible armed confrontation with Iran due to the stalling of the diplomatic talks. Outside of this information, just in Asia alone, this moves us all the way on into Europe itself, where we've been able to hear even larger information coming out about the war in Ukraine today. We have been able to see and hear that there's been a significant shift currently in U.S. governmental thinking from the Office of the President and multiple other executive departments that are beginning to show that the United States of America is viewing the Russians unfavorably, much like the prior administration. We have also been able to see that the Russian Federation has once again put out absolutely unacceptable terms to enter into a ceasefire, practically saying that the Ukrainians have to give up before they enter into a ceasefire. And we've also been able to hear of the guest list for the May 9th Victory Day Parade, and it'll be very interesting, y'all, who's going to be there and who's not, because it's actually a very small list. Meanwhile, inside of the actual war in Ukraine, we have been able to see the Ukrainian armed forces still are holding the small amounts of ground they have left inside the Kursk Oblast, and have been inflicting significant casualties onto Russian attacking forces, and also their supply lines further back towards the area of Bolshoi-Solatskoy. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian armed forces have also been holding their lines in the areas of Kupiansk, Liman, Pokrovsk, and the entirety of the Zaporizhia front, and have been continuing their offensives inside of Toretsk, taking slightly more ground and also taking a significant amount of prisoners. Today has been a pretty large day in terms of news. Pretty much every single day is becoming a large day in terms of news, because we are covering at this point about 3 active conflicts, the war in Ukraine, the war with Iran, the war that is now happening between Pakistan and India as a border war, and now we're also having to cover the future conflict between China and Taiwan practically every single day at this point. There is an insanely large amount of news that we're having to cover on this channel, but nevertheless, we are proud to be able to be the ones that are able to call ourselves the primary news providers for tens of thousands of people every single day, as the world is getting closer and closer to what we can only describe as a state of world war. Nevertheless,
yeah, honestly, not to fearmonger, but it feels like covering so many different conflicts from literally every region of the world, and also conflicts in the very beginning stages before they really truly pop off in a big fashion. It really feels like the pregame for World War III. Like, it feels like it's kind of around that precipice where things could go really sideways if it gets any more escalated from here.
It really is looking absolutely insane at this point, at least in terms of global tensions, because there is a conflict going on quite literally everywhere in the world at this point, in some degree or another. The only place that there isn't an active conflict going on right now is the continent of Oceania, South America, and North America. Beyond that, every other region, well, also Antarctica, obviously, but beyond that, every other continent has some sort of an active conflict happening within it at this very moment right now. Nevertheless, I also have to point out that tonight is the Sunday night fundraiser, and tonight's fundraiser is for Nova Ukraine, an absolutely incredible fundraiser that has done great work for the people of Ukraine and continues to do great work for the citizens of Ukraine and helping them to hopefully stave away the clutches of war as much as they can. But nevertheless, we are going to be moving on into the major news tonight. The massive news that really has come to a shock to some people, because we've seen it in the chat time and time again. I just saw it a second ago from some guy, I think his name was Blicky, and he said, I hope this title is real and it's not clickbait, because if it's clickbait, I've lost a lot of credit or in belief in this channel. And believe it or not, you would think that that would be clickbait. It's actually not clickbait. That is quite literally what happened today. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea has officially entered the war in Ukraine. This is something that's actually quite shocking, as we have been able to hear that Kim Jong-un has officially ordered North Korean troops to deploy to Russia, formally notifying Moscow as a show of military support. The way that they did this was through the North Korean-Russian Treaty on Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, which was created in June of last year, in June of 2024. We actually covered this joint defense pact and the creation of it here on the channel when that happened about a year ago at this point, because it was quite a significant shift in the relationship between the Russian Federation and North Korea. To catch you up a little bit with what happened with that and why that even existed to be invoked today, what was happening in the latter part of 2024, or really the earlier part, the former part of 2024, in the earlier months of that year, was that the Russian Federation was going through a significant ammunition shortage in every single aspect. Heavy artillery, missiles, and quite literally the wide variety of munitions were running out. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea was the only one that could provide these munitions. And thus, the Russian Federation decided that they would begin to give North Korea materials such as foodstuffs and also technological abilities and scientists, so that way they could get this large untapped resource of North Korean munitions. As an extension of this, the Russian Federation and North Korea officially signed the North Korean-Russian Treaty on Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, and that entered into effect of June 18th of last year. Then, as of right now today, the North Koreans have actually invoked Article 4 of that treaty, which states, and I quote in English, that should either nation be put in a state of war by an armed invasion, the other shall provide military and other assistance with all means in its possession without delay, in accordance with Article 51 of the UN Charter and the laws of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and the Russian Federation. As of today, officially, Article 4 of that treaty has been invoked, meaning that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, by all official measures today, has entered the war in Ukraine as an active belligerent on the side of the Russian Federation. In short, they have joined the war in Ukraine as an official note of today. This is a fairly interesting thing because it might not actually change much of anything. The amount of munitions that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea has provided to the Russian Federation over the course of the last year has already been significant. Quite truly, a waterfall of munitions have been entering the Russian Federation for about a year at this point, even a little bit longer. And so far, we've already seen that an entire infantry regiment of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea was provided for the Russian Federation in the counteroffensives in the Kursk Oblast and suffered significant casualties. We believe that a singular regiment or several more regiments may be the absolute logistical cap that the Russian Federation will be able to support or provide for the Democratic People's Republic of Korea to enter into the conflict. Meaning, as far as manpower and munitions, the North Koreans have practically already capped out everything prior to this point in the war. This is really more so just an official notice to the world that North Korea, by all accounts, will be involved in the conflict in full form from this point forward. It is quite an interesting move to see, and one that we really didn't expect on an official level, because this has been going on an unofficial level for approximately 6 to 8 months at this point, especially considering
Although,
go ahead.
Although I will say there were some signs and indications that something was changing in the background, because of course the entire time that North Korea has been sending troops to fight against Ukraine, they've been trying to keep it really on the down low. They're not trying to make that very public. But in the recent couple of days, we've been seeing photos being released by the Russian MOD, clearly showing Russians posing with North Koreans. And prior to just a couple of days ago, they were hiding those photos and would not release those to the public. But now they've been openly shared as of yesterday and the day before that. So then today we heard the official announcement they had entered the war with Article 4 declaration from North Korea. So it was coming. And for some reason, they were trying to prep it and basically prep everybody for that. I don't know really why, but it seems like they were trying to do that in the media.
Yeah, it's a very interesting kind of a thing because a lot of people have really actually been debating today, us included, whether this is going to change anything at all. Because once again, while this is an official declaration of war or an official declaration of joining the war on Russia's side, meaning that North Korea is now declaring war on Ukraine, this is something that may or may not really change anything at all, considering that North Korea has already been providing the maximum amount of munitions they could to Russia and have already provided an entire infantry regiment that was chewed up in less than 3 weeks of contact with the Ukrainians already. And this is bringing us on into a pretty major question. With Kim Jong-un officially declaring that they have entered the war in Ukraine today by recognizing troops sent to Russia and also invoking Article 4 of the defensive pact between the two countries, is that really going to be changing anything? And it seems that there is a bit of a mix. It's actually an even split amongst two different camps of people believing two separate things. Most people are saying that it really changes nothing, but the other half of people are saying this will cause a serious global response against the Russian Federation and North Korea due to the official declaration of war that was provided by North Korea today. And a lot of people have been debating this a good bit in the chat, whether this is going to change anything or not. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well? Is it going to change anything at all, or is this going to largely remain a status quo? It's just that an official declaration has now been given.
So it looks like 45% of the audience said it really changes nothing in reality, while 42% said this will cause a global response now that North Korea has officially entered the war, and 6% said there's really nothing that can be done. And certainly, I will say this right off the bat. We have known for months that North Korean troops are fighting in Ukraine. That has not been a secret to most people that have been following the war very closely. That has been documented, and we've reported it several times on the channel. But like I mentioned a moment ago, it has been kept secret officially between Russia, North Korea, and their other Axis buddies. So now that they're publicly acknowledging it, that creates a different situation diplomatically for other allied countries, let's say the United States, the UK, France, etc. That creates a little bit of a different situation. And before, South Korea was very much opposed to North Korea sending troops to Ukraine to fight. They were very much opposed, and South Korea was even threatening to send weapons, even more weapons to Ukraine to fight against those North Koreans. So I think this will cause somewhat of a global response. It's not going to be like the start of World War III, because they've been fighting there already, and we've known that, but it is going to cause some sort of response. I'm just not really sure what that response is going to look like, because the world simply can't ignore this official declaration. And in my opinion, I think Kim Jong-un is about to find himself on the short end of the stick by trying to help out his buddy Putin. So I think it will cause some response, but not a super large one. But Enforcer, what say you?
I think I would have to agree with the 42% that this will cause a global response because, once again, on an official level, things have changed. On an unofficial level, things really are not going to be changing too much because there are a lot of logistical and supply side concerns that are clearly something that would have to be addressed by both sides. For one, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea's infantry regiment that was sent as an expeditionary force to the Kursk region was entirely supported and provided equipment by the Russian Federation's armed forces, meaning that while this was a North Korean unit, it was being supplied and supported by the Russian army like any other regular Russian army unit, meaning that even still, the Russian Federation and the introduction of more North Korean troops into any given front would still cause significant strain on the already existing Russian supply lines, which would somehow have to find a way to accommodate this larger influx of troops, the need for supplies, equipment, and also munitions to keep those soldiers fighting. And for that reason, not really a lot's going to change. The Russians can only accommodate probably several more North Korean regiments on the active front, which isn't going to be that much of a change. It will increase the amount of soldiers from to about 60 to 80,000 additional troops on the active front right now. But considering the quality of these troops and their absolute lack of modern fighting experience, much like we saw in the Kursk Oblast, most of those regiments will be reduced to combat ineffectiveness in terms of the losses in about less than 3 weeks to a month and a half, based off of what we saw inside the Kursk Oblast. So it's not really going to be changing much in the war whatsoever, rather than there is going to be more meat in the meat grinder in a sense. Also, in terms of ammunition being provided to the Russian Federation, the North Koreans have already been providing tens of thousands of shells to the Russian Federation a month, and from what we understand, this is largely reaching the peak of North Korean supply efficiency that can be provided in any given monthly period. The North Koreans, unlike any other country, do not have any kind of intermodal or container ports within the entirety of their country. Crazily enough, North Korea is one of the only countries left in the world that uses purely break bulk ships. And that doesn't really sound like a big difference when we talk about intermodal containers and break bulk ships, but the reality is that it's actually a massive difference in terms of logistical efficiency. Containers are wildly efficient in terms of the cost it takes to transport a tonnage of goods per mile, and also the manhandling, well, really the handling and shipping costs are far cheaper when using containers, and also the turnaround time is a lot faster per ton than, say, a break bulk ship. Break bulk ships are all that North Korea has, and this greatly hamstrings their ability to be able to conduct any kind of major shipments of munitions to the Russian Federation, and it has been estimated over the last year that this is practically the logistical peak of the munitions that North Korea could provide in any given month to Russia, meaning that they can't provide any more per month. They've already reached the limit. So once again, their official declaration of war isn't going to allow for a flood of shells into Russia. It's quite literally going to be the exact same amount it's already been, because they've reached the peak of their efficiency. So with that in mind, at least on those levels, nothing is going to change. But on an official diplomatic level, a lot of things have changed. So far over the course of the entire war, the only two active belligerents in the war has been the Russian Federation on the Russian Federation side and the state of Ukraine on the state of Ukraine side. There has been no other active belligerents up until this point, until today, and now North Korea is openly stating that they are involved in the war on the behalf of the Russian Federation. As far as
also, I see people saying in the live chat as well. There's been a couple people saying this. I think most people understand, but just to explain this one more time, North Korea has a defensive pact with Russia. If Russia is attacked or they feel like they need to defend themselves, and according to Russia, they're defending themselves against the quote unquote bad groups inside of Ukraine, which is total bullcrap, but that's the excuse that Russia's giving. So they're calling on North Korea to invoke Article 4 of the Defense Treaty and send troops in. It's like the same thing as Article 5 of NATO. And when other countries declare Article 5 and jump in, they are essentially declaring war on the country that is attacking the country that was a part of that Defense Treaty. So it is a declaration of war without necessarily saying it's a declaration of war, because when you send soldiers in and start fighting against another country, that is by definition war. So that's what we're seeing right here.
Well, it's the exact same. I don't think some people are getting this, but it's the exact same thing as invoking Article 5 in NATO. Like, that's going to war. So, you know, if you invoke Article 5 inside of the NATO charter, and then everyone goes and joins the war against Russia, that means that everyone just went to war. So I think that some people might be trying to, you know, be a little bit high and mighty with the semantics there, but that means you're going to war. If you invoke a defensive pact, which says if another party gets attacked, you're going to go to war on their side. I mean, that's literally what this says right here. This is the highlighted area. Article 4 states that if either nation is put in the state of war by an armed invasion, the other will provide military and other assistance with all means in its possession without delay, which is almost the exact same wordage that's found in Article 5 of the NATO Charter, which means that you're joining the war on the side of the country that you're an ally with that just got attacked, meaning you're going to war on their side. So that's what's happened. You know, I know that some people may not really be able to wrap a little bit of a thought around that, but that's how that works. When you activate a defensive pact, that means that all of the members of the defensive pact are joining the war on the side of their ally. So with that,
I just wonder though, what actually sparked North Korea and Russia to think, let's go ahead and make this public, let's make it official, because they've been fighting, like we've said, the North Koreans been fighting inside of Ukraine for months, and there's been no real secret. It's been like an open secret that they've been fighting there for months. So what is the actual incentive behind making this public and making it official? Because surely they did it for a strategic reason, and I wonder what that reason was.
I was actually going to get to that, talking about how nothing's really going to change physically in the war, but on a diplomatic level, everything is going to change. Because right now, to remind you all of this, the United States of America has been involved so far in an attempt to try and negotiate a ceasefire in the war, and then further on a peace treaty after a ceasefire has been initiated. This is changing a lot of that because now the Russian Federation is actively showing that they're bringing in defensive pact partners into the war. And so now this is escalating the war and involving even farther parties into the conflict, which is going to make it a lot more difficult to negotiate, because usually now in a negotiation, this means that North Korea actually has a small seat at the negotiations, making things just that much more difficult. Pretty much meaning that this is a spit in the face to the United States diplomatic effort on an official level, and I have a feeling that this is most likely going to end all U.S. diplomatic efforts, because it already appears that those are going to be ending inevitably here soon, from statements from the office of the president yesterday and today, and also statements from lower secretaries within the executive branch. But beyond that, this has been quite the move today by North Korea, and that was also coming on the cusp of news that the United States of America was attempting to pursue talks with the Democratic People's Republic, as the administration is quietly exploring options for renewed talks with North Korea. I'm not exactly sure what we're going to be talking to them about, including a possible president to dictator meeting. But I think that's now going to be shelved with the development that happened literally 4 hours after that came out, because now it appears that North Korea is an active belligerent in the war in Ukraine, which is probably something that the president does not want to see. The president has
I think that the U.S. was trying to go around Russia. They were trying to go to the people that are facilitating the war, and they were going to China and they were going to North Korea, trying to see if they could talk them out of supporting Russia. But of course, it's like they're all in bed together. It's like you can't talk them out of like supporting their friend, because otherwise they have no allies. And while Russia may be weak, if a world war did break out, they'll need each other, even in their weakened state, to be able to even stand a chance. So, they can't just turn on each other. And that's just a misunderstanding of how that whole alliance works between those countries.
Yeah, it really is something, honestly. I don't really know how in the world that was supposed to work, and I don't really know what we would even be attempting to speak to North Korea about at all, but nevertheless, it appears that that's probably going to be a dead end at this point. We're not going to be pursuing that from this point on, I would at least expect. But moving on from that, and now that news with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and also them joining the war with the Russian Federation, it is time for us to move on into the area of the Republic of India, because we've actually been getting a large amount of news from the Indian subcontinent today as well. Moving on into the area of the Republic of India, it has become quite clear to many, including us here on the channel for days, that the current border war that's ongoing between India and Pakistan, which only started a few days ago because of the Pahalgam massacre, which killed about 30 to 40 Indian citizens and also foreign tourists, pretty much started off the beginning of hostilities between the two countries again. Currently, India has cut off all water heading into Pakistan, which provides about 90% of all of the fresh water currently inside of the country, and we are now hearing that experts are stating that an attack by the Republic of India against Pakistan is only going to be a matter of days away. This is quite obvious at this point, because we have seen massive troop buildups on all sides, and the ongoing of the border conflict currently around Jammu and Kashmir is certainly showing us that this isn't going to be dying down anytime soon. Not only that, we have not even heard that both sides have attempted any kind of a diplomatic negotiation over the current incident to try and de-escalate the situation, showing that this is still rapidly spiraling out of control, and it's going straight into a total war here within only a few days. This is also coming on top of the news that the Indian government has now stated that if any Pakistani nationals are found inside of India beyond the 48-hour deadline to leave the country, they will be jailed and imprisoned for a 3-year term if they are found inside the country beyond the deadline. The deadline, from what we understand, lapsed about 2 hours ago. So we are going to most likely be seeing that a decent amount of Pakistani nationals who were not able to get out of the country in time will be arrested and imprisoned for a tenure of around 3 years as the situation continues to escalate. We have also seen today that Indian naval vessels, specifically destroyers of the Republic of India's Navy, have pulled up right outside of the coastal waters of Pakistan and have now started to test fire anti-ship missiles towards the direction of Pakistan, and what appears to be a provocative action to once again begin to raise the escalations even higher between India and Pakistan, which we can see in this clip right here. We see them firing the anti-ship missiles from the destroyers of the Indian Navy.
I like how those missiles turn midair like that. It's always impressive to see that.
Yes, you know what's actually really cool is that there's a special little rocket cap on the top of the missiles that helps it to flip over like that. Like you'll see it pops out of the tube, and you see that little motor up there actually spin it to where it's pretty much horizontal. And once it's at the right trajectory, the cap you can see right there actually pops off of the front of the missile. The missile's main motor engages, and then it actually starts heading towards its target. It's a pretty neat kind of a launch system, and it's actually seen on loads of different missile varieties, including the S-300 and S-400 surface-to-air missile systems of the Russian armed forces.
Very impressive. I like to see it. Also, that main rocket motor looks like it has a little bit of a like thrust vectoring going on as well.
They're pretty advanced missiles. I'm not exactly sure what kind of anti-ship missiles the Indian Navy does use, but just based off of the vectoring system, it is a fairly advanced missile type. We actually don't see that even on some missiles in the U.S. Navy, so a pretty interesting thing to see right there. But moving on from that and out of that clip, meanwhile, on land, Pakistan has continued to rapidly move masses of armed forces towards the area of the Indian-Pakistani border. We were actually able to see a large, what I would assume to be an artillery brigade moving on its way towards the border, near to the southern region of the border between Pakistan and India today. And we also were able to see a large movement of armored vehicles, such as tanks and armored personnel carriers, which is suggesting that India is actually, Pakistan, is moving a bulk of forces forward that actually would be more offensive in nature than defensive, possibly showing that they're waiting for the Indians to attack them. They plan on repelling the Indian attack and then immediately conducting a counterattack in return and attempting to push northbound into the Jammu and Kashmir region to capture the dams, which are currently closed at this moment, and open them to allow the flow of water back into the Indus River. That's most likely where the heaviest fighting is going to be happening, is near the Lipa Valley region and pretty much inside of Jammu and Kashmir in India, and just right north of the Pakistani capital of Islamabad, because that will be the most important strategic target for Pakistan to capture in an offensive, because if any side has time going against them, it is going to be Pakistan. Pakistan is currently witnessing already severe droughts inside the Indus River and its tributaries, as the Republic of India has closed off all access to water inside the country. For a brief moment yesterday, some of the dams actually were open to allow for a violent rush of water to enter into Pakistan, which caused regional flooding within some areas, but as of today, the dams have once again been closed, and we are seeing that the rivers are beginning to dry up quite rapidly. This means that Pakistan will have to initiate an offensive action against India here within the inevitable future to secure their own interest of seeing the water flow back through the Indus. This also means that the heaviest fighting and the largest offensives will actually be seen in the most difficult terrain of this active front line, near to Jammu and Kashmir on the southern side of the Himalayan mountain range, as opposed to the most common form of fighting, which would be seen in any normal conventional war, which would most likely be seen over the plains of Punjab and Rajasthan, as well as the regions just west of the Pakistan border. Nevertheless, we also were able to see a large buildup of Pakistani armored forces in the form of main battle tanks near to the city of Narawal, which is near to the area of the Punjab region of India, which we were able to see in this clip right here. These tanks are somewhat older. I don't know what that guy was saying, but we're going to mute it because it might be copyright. But we can see right here a large number of Pakistani tanks in a column near to the area of a road, and it appears that they're still offloading them here from their truck transports. But it is once again showing us that there is a large buildup of offensive vehicles, artillery, tanks, and armored personnel carriers that are being built up along most areas of the border. It is a very interesting thing to note once again, because from what we are expecting at this point that India is going to fire the first shots of the total war, moving it on out of a border war, but it also appears at the same time Pakistan seems to be the one that's structuring its forces the most for an offensive action right after this total war begins here in just a few days. This is also coming at the exact same time as the Pakistanis are now operating air forces out of the Swat and Skardu air bases and have been conducting sorties today near to the area of Jammu and Kashmir, which we can see in this clip right here. And that appears to be a JF-17, which is a Pakistani indigenously made aircraft. You see another aircraft following close behind it. And that also appears to be a JF-17 with a twin cockpit, which is actually somewhat interesting. Some of y'all are probably wondering, what the hell is a JF-17? I've never heard of that. It actually is an indigenously made Pakistani fighter aircraft, which you can see right here. These are not really known commonly out in the aviation world. Really not a lot of people know about Pakistani and Indian aircraft that are made in-house in their own respective countries. But this aircraft actually has been in service in the Indian Air Force for some time at this point. It's been in service since 2007, meaning that it's about roughly 15 to 16 years old at this point, as far as Pakistan is concerned. A fairly modern aircraft, and it is comparable in its abilities to that of the F-16. So pretty much an indigenously made F-16, which for some reason is an incredibly difficult word for me to say. Nevertheless, we are seeing that they are conducting sorties near to the area today. We have not heard of any airstrikes, but it does appear that there are ongoing armed air patrols near to the area of Jammu and Kashmir, which is showing that the Pakistani armed forces are concerned that an air attack from the Republic of India could begin at any given moment, and now the Air Force is at a constant state of readiness, waiting for these inevitable attacks, which are going to be occurring within just the next few days. Beyond that, though, many people have been talking about the heavy troop movements seen on film that are heading towards the Indian border from Pakistan, and a lot of people are wondering, is Pakistan making a mistake with this? Should the Pakistanis back down, or should they actually engage in this fight? And there are decent arguments for both. One, the Pakistanis probably should back down, at least in some arguments, because from what we are understanding, the Pakistani government did fund and support the terrorist attack which occurred at Pahalgam, which ended up killing around 40 innocent people. And largely the entire conflict which we are seeing right now has largely been created through the Pakistani government's direct support of terrorist organizations. On the other hand, looking at it from the Pakistani side, it appears that the Islamic Republic of Pakistan really has no choice, as India, in response to the act of terror, has completely shut off access to fresh water for 90% of the population living inside of Pakistan, meaning that if Pakistan does nothing, several months may pass if the situation remains the same, and nearly 200 million Pakistanis may be in the process of dying or may have died due to a complete lack of water. Agriculture will cease to exist, and many other commercial and industrial concerns inside the country will also start to completely collapse, as fresh water is an important asset of any kind of basic function of life anywhere on the planet. With this in mind, a lot of people have been throwing in different opinions, but nevertheless, it seems that most people are believing that Pakistan should actually back down and attempt to try a diplomatic resolution to the situation, regardless of the problem right now occurring inside of the mountains of Jammu and Kashmir, where the Indians have cut off their water supply. Some others are saying that Pakistan has a right to defend, but that's actually a small group of people who are saying that, and a slightly larger group is saying that it seems like both are at fault, and they should just try and find some sort of a diplomatic resolution to the situation. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So is Pakistan making a mistake? Because Pakistan is sending heavy troop deployments to the Indian border, and they're getting ready for a showdown like they've never seen before. So Pakistan's going all in, and is that a mistake? Like I said, so 47% said yes, Pakistan should back down, while 22% said it seems like both India and Pakistan are at fault, and 18% said no, Pakistan has a right to defend itself. And a lot of people in the live chat are asking who is on the right and who is in the wrong. And this is totally subjective, by the way. This is my opinion. I would say that based on the current situation, Pakistan is in the wrong because there was a terror attack, and the terror attack originated from Pakistan on India, and that really, really irritated the Indians very badly. And there was already a deep hatred between those two countries. So that sparked a uncontrollable series of hateful events after that. The Indians were more than happy to start escalating, and the Pakistanis, even though they were in the wrong, started escalating in return. And then now we're seeing the water get cut off by the Indians to Pakistan, and it's spiraling out of control from here. So Pakistan should really try to be diplomatic here because right now they're the ones who stepped in it, and India is simply responding to it. Granted, India is going a little bit overboard, but they are responding to what was a terror attack on their country. So right now they're both kind of semi at fault, but Pakistan is the main one at fault. And for them to be deploying such heavy troop movements and making such bold threats, that is certainly not a good move to make, considering that they were the initial aggressors and the ones in the wrong. So I'm with the 47%. Pakistan is making a mistake. They should back down, but I can pretty much guarantee you that they are not going to back down. They're going all the way in, and it looks like there's no question about that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say, in my opinion, I do believe that the Pakistanis should back down, considering that this entire situation was created because of what appears to be a state-sponsored terrorist attack by the Islamic Republic of Pakistan onto the state of India in Jammu and Kashmir. And I know what some people have been saying in the chat, and I gotta say, sometimes I don't know where the logic's coming from on some statements, because some people have been saying, well, I mean, the Pakistanis deserved that to conduct that terrorist attack on the Indians because that's really their land. I don't really know how people justify, cutting off the waters of the Pakistanis wanting to kill tens of millions of people, and then on the flip side, people are trying to justify a terrorist attack against India, because I'd have to say, just looking at them at their face value, both of them are technically crimes against humanity in some form or another, so not really the greatest things to advocate for. But one thing I will say is that Pakistan is largely in the wrong. I believe that they should try and find some kind of a diplomatic resolution to the situation. There is still time. The water is not going to run out tomorrow. It's going to run out in most likely a couple of weeks at this point. So this will give them time to come to some form of a diplomatic resolution with India and possibly give concessions for the terrorist attack, because it's quite clear, at least as far as India is concerned, the terrorist attack this time crossed the line. And some of y'all are hearing me say this time. This actually isn't the first time. This has been going on for decades. Even over the past few years, there have been significant terrorist attacks within Western India, including one that we covered a little bit on the channel, where an armed terrorist group hijacked an express train and ended up killing about 300 people on board after the hostage situation turned ugly. So with that in mind, this isn't the first of its type that's been happening in this region, but nevertheless, I think that there is a way that the Pakistanis could back down, and they should back down, and try and come to some form of a diplomatic concession with the Republic of India to avoid unnecessary bloodshed and conflict in the region that largely was provoked because of a state-sponsored action by Pakistan. That would be my opinion, at least on this situation. As far as the U.S. is concerned right now, it appears that the U.S.'s official position is to completely ignore the situation and act like it's not happening. Because I haven't really seen any official statements yet from the U.S. Department of State. Now, I've not seen any official statements yet from the Office of the President of the United States that's saying that we support either side. The only person I've heard make a statement was the director of the FBI, Kash Patel, and he stated that we support India, but he's also, I believe, a second-generation Indian American, so it's like I think he may have some inherent bias there, and he's also not the Secretary of State, which actually makes the calls on those kinds of decisions. So,
he doesn't even have a hand in foreign policy. It's like the FBI is not a foreign policy body, so I'm not even sure what purview he has to even make that statement, really. He really doesn't have the authority to make that statement.
Well, let me see here really quickly. I want to find something. Let's see. Let me see here. I'm trying to see about his. Let's see. He was born in Garden. Yeah, so he's of Ugandan. Let's see. He is a son of Pramod Patel, a Ugandan of Indian descent. So he is like a second generation Indian American, and it's like, oh, he's the director of the FBI, which has absolutely no purview in foreign affairs whatsoever. The FBI is focused internally on domestic crimes, largely inside the United States on a federal level. So I don't know why he was the one making a statement on that today, but take that with a grain of salt. That's not an official statement of the U.S. Department of State or an official statement from the Office of the President of the United States. And also, that guy clearly has an inherent bias. On top of all that, considering that he's a second-generation Indian-American citizen, so, really doesn't play into anything at all, at least on the official U.S. position.
It seems like the official position is kind of to sit back and wait and see how this unfolds, because it is kind of weird that the U.S. hasn't made any official, actual statement. Forget the FBI director's statement. That doesn't count. The State Department, nor has the president made any statement at all about this entire situation, which is a kind of bit weird, because it seems like usually, since the mission is allegedly peacekeeping, that they would want to step in before it even kicks off and try to prevent this from happening, but they're not even taking preventative measures. They're just watching the whole thing and generally just ignoring it.
Also, really quickly, though, I saw Michael Thomas say, as a citizen, he has a right to an opinion. As a federal servant, he has a right to no opinion or represents the United States on an official stance in terms of foreign policy. He does not have that kind of a right. Your rights as a federal servant start to become greatly minimized, so that doesn't mean that as the director of the FBI, as a citizen, you have the right to start setting U.S. foreign policy standards. That's more so at the discretion of the President of the United States and more so carried out by the U.S. Department of State. The private citizen, like a private citizen, just because he's a private citizen, doesn't have the right to start laying out the official stance of the U.S. in foreign policy just because he's a private citizen. And also on top of that, he's the director of the FBI. That's not even his department. His department is domestic crimes on a federal level across state lines for the large part, or other serious crimes that the U.S. federal government is investigating. That's not his job. Like, if he wants to have that job, he can maybe ask Marco Rubio to step down from the Department of from the Secretary of State, and he can become the Secretary of State. But that isn't his job, so he doesn't have an official position to make statements for the United States on foreign affairs whatsoever. But anyways, moving on from that, though, I do have to say that this whole situation going on in the Indian subcontinent is going to be pretty rough. It looks like it's going to turn into a conventional war, and it is going to be a conventional war, at least from what everyone's expecting at this point. And I do have to remind everyone that the expert analysis on the channel has not been wrong. We have said before that Iran was going to attack Israel, and it happened. The only time that I've ever been wrong on anything was way back in 2021 and 2022, when I said that the Russians would never be stupid enough to attack Ukraine, because that would be equivalent to global foreign policy suicide. And then they did it, and then it ended up being foreign policy suicide, but they still did it nevertheless. This, on the other hand, the war has to happen because Pakistan has no choice. Because if the Indians keep cutting off the water, which they're doing right now, the Pakistanis are going to start dying. So they're at a race against time right now in Pakistan. If India doesn't even fire the first shot, Pakistan's going to be forced to fire the first shot. So this war is going to evolve from the current border war that we're seeing into a full-scale war, whether India is the one actually instigating it or not. So that largely is the situation at this moment down there. So that's why we're guaranteed that there's going to be a major war happening in between India and Pakistan. It's not the first time. It certainly won't be the last time, because the situation between these two countries is almost identical to the one between Iran and Israel, at least in terms of land claims and such stuff like that. But nevertheless, I hope that addresses the Indian subcontinent situation the best we can, because we're about to be moving on over into the fun segment, literally just a couple of 100 miles west in the Middle East, because everyone knows that the Middle East is always a fun segment. And I gotta tell y'all, folks, the bots flooding in tonight have been mental. I just saw Matthew turn on the 5-minute subscriber thing to make it to where you have to be a subscriber for 5 minutes to comment. There have been an insane number of people coming in here tonight that we've never seen before, just trying to claim that everything we're saying is absolute clickbait, like we haven't had video and picture evidence tonight or any other day to back up our claims that we're making here, or official government statements. It has been a crazy night with that, but I do have to thank everyone so much for watching so far. 70,000 people have already watched the stream just in the first hour, and there's 15.6 thousand people here at this very moment. But we are entirely honored to know that we get to cover the news to all of y'all. We hope that y'all been enjoying it so far, and there's still a good bit to go inside of Ukraine and the Middle East so far. But nevertheless, y'all have been here tonight to be able to see two brand new things happen, like two things that we've never seen before. An official declaration of war by North Korea on Ukraine, which would just never be expected. And then also on top of that, India and Pakistan are still gearing up to move from the border war right into a total war. So it's going to be one hell of a night, that's for sure, one hell of a day tomorrow, without a doubt. Now, I also got to say really quickly, just for everyone who has already subscribed to the channel in the past, I am so sorry about what happened today with our short war video that came out. I recorded a masterpiece, a 24-minute long news summary of the things that happened today. It actually didn't include the declaration of war by North Korea. That literally happened 5 minutes after I got done recording. And crazily enough, somehow my computer mislabeled the recording that I made and then relabeled a recording from 11 days ago to the label that I put on today's recording. So I uploaded a recording that was 11 days old as the video for today's news, and then I found out like 10 minutes later, 16 minutes later, I think, that it was the wrong one. We had to take down the video. So it was just a whole clown show with that today. Big apologies to that y'all didn't get your midday news fix, because we were really wanting to get that out, and I spent hours trying to get it out for the computer to mislabel the files somehow. Don't know how that happened. But beyond that, we're still happy to have y'all here tonight and have loads of people getting to hear the news of what happened today, quite literally all around the world. But nevertheless, it is time for us to move on into the Middle East. But before we do, I do want to give a shout out to the fundraiser, because in a single hour, we have raised nearly $2.2 thousand for Nova Ukraine. Holy
Amazing.
moly! And we're getting close. We're getting close to the absolute fundraiser goal. And I'm going to give a massive thanks and a shout out to everyone who's been supporting the fundraiser so far tonight. And hopefully, we will be able to see that we reached the $2.5 thousand fundraiser goal here within only minutes, because the fundraiser is actually doing way better than we expected it to do tonight, because we have seen that some people have been, having some issues with the economic situation going on, and we entirely understand that. But nevertheless, we have been absolutely shocked tonight that the Lee Spring Army is still powering through another fundraiser and is about to pass fundraiser goal here incredibly soon. So a huge shout out to all of y'all so far. And also, Matthew, could you give us a list of the top donors that we've had so far tonight?
Yes. So far, and also if I've missed your donation, let me know. Give me a shout, because the live chat's been running like a maniac tonight, and I've been dealing with bots from every corner of the world tonight, literally from India, Pakistan, Iran, everywhere. So it's been crazy. So far, here is the list of top donors. So far, we've had a 250 from Lord Cog, the largest one of the night, as well as a 200 from Just Chillin', and a 150 from James Hughes, as well as another 100 from Lord Cog, and then we had a 100 from Activista, as well as Nerdo and Hal Rose. And then we had a 50 from Snow White, Nightmare Before Christmas, Lisa Mitchell, and Randall Jones. And so far, that is our top donors of the night. And huge shout to y'all and everyone else who has donated and brought us up to $2,250 raised so far, which is fantastic. And once again, it is going to a very good cause, which is Nova Ukraine, which does very good humanitarian work inside of Ukraine to help the innocent civilians who are victims of the war and Russia's aggression. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I got to give a massive shout out to everyone who supported the fundraiser so far tonight. An absolutely impressive thing. I got to thank all of the people who we were able to call out, and all the folks who threw in support that was so small but yet numerous we couldn't count it out, because each and every single one of y'all has made this fundraiser possible tonight and is getting us closer and closer to the goal. We are right now at $2,270 raised, meaning that we're about $230 away from the fundraiser goal. So we are literally within spitting distance at this point of surpassing the fundraiser goal. An absolutely incredible thing, and it's great to know that the Lee Spring Army continues to support the Western and American causes around the world, and is continuing to try and help in our own way to lead the Ukrainians and other nations in support of Western interests to victory, in support of the United States and our great Western interests. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And I also understand, Matthew, that we've had a couple of questions so far that have been wildly good tonight. Well, questions on quite literally everything going on. So what do we got, Matthew?
So we have very juicy questions. Also, since we have 15,000 people here tonight, a ton of new people, if you are new to the channel and you want to throw a question our way for us to answer live on the stream, we can't promise we'll answer every single one, but if you want us to add it to our queue and our spreadsheet, tag @EnforcerMatt in the live chat and put your question behind it, and I will add it to our spreadsheet, and there's a good chance that we might be able to get to it. But jumping into our first question, this one goes to Randolph. He said, do you think North Korea actually officially jumping into the war against Ukraine might encourage the ROK or South Korea to send arms to Ukraine?
Before I answer that question, Matthew, I got to put out something a little bit big. Folks, we hit the goal! Hey!
Jugga, Igor! That's what I'm talking about, baby. We hit it in like 50-something minutes. That is very fantastic. Once again, another successful fundraiser, baby.
We surpassed the fundraiser goal thanks to a $75 donation from Gary Bont to Nova Ukraine. I got to give a massive shout out to you and a huge thanks to everyone, because we were able to hit the fundraiser goal in less than 50 minutes of being on air. A huge congratulations to all all of y'all. And a massive thanks once again, because the Lee Spring Army is always proving that it will never die, and that the Lee Spring Army will be a long-lived organization for sure. And so put an LSA in the chat, because we hit another goal. Absolutely amazing. And as far as the question from the incredible viewer that asked, will the South Koreans join the war, as the official name is, the Republic of Korea, and I like that you called it the official name. That's actually a nice touch. I would say it's a possibility at this point, actually. South Korea doesn't have the kind of logistical abilities to transport their troops and equipment to Ukraine easily, because they would have to most likely enter by a Ukrainian port, meaning that if they officially join the war on the on the Ukrainian side, the Russians might actually be able to intercept those troop transports in the Black Sea and destroy them before they make it into Ukraine. There is the possibility, however, that the North Koreans could enter into Poland and then travel into Ukraine that way, but that may be considered Poland joining the war directly by the Russians and then kick off World War III in between NATO and the Russian Federation. So that might be a bit of a stretch. Nevertheless, though, I do believe that South Korea will be getting involved in Ukraine in some sort of a heavier way, in some way, shape, or form, because they usually respond to the North Koreans in turn wherever the North Koreans are. And considering that they officially joined the war on the Russian side today, as far as the North Koreans went, the South Koreans will most likely be soon to follow into Ukraine itself, if they can. But I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. Because, another thing I have to point out, some of y'all may not know this, but South Korea actually was involved in the Vietnam War. In a limited capacity, they sent the White Horse, which is their special forces unit, to Vietnam, and they were a very interesting unit. They said they were very thorough in interrogations. They would take a couple of Vietnamese guys up in a helicopter for a helicopter ride, and they would play a version of Squid Game. It was called Snitch on Your Buddies, and if you lost the game, they'd throw you out of the helicopter. Kind of like a crazy game right there, but they played it a lot, and they said that there weren't really a lot of winners. There were about as many winners as that as there was at Squid Game, but beyond that, though, they played the game, and a lot of them lost. But beyond that, I hope that does address that well. Great question, by the way. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to, let's see, this one is going to go to Norm Pritchett, who said, does this Russia-North Korean development help Russia with respect to their next military escalation against Europe?
I would say most likely not. The North Koreans are not an incredibly strong force, and also North Korea is having to operate, if we measure from their ports like Chongqing, let's measure from there and take a rough shot at the actual distance that the North Koreans are having to travel if they travel through Russia. So it would be, we're trying to make sure to follow the Trans-Siberian Railway here for the most accurate estimate. So their supply line is going to be approximately 5,000 miles long. Overland the entire way, which is a pretty expensive thing. It's also a pretty laborious thing to have a 5,000-mile supply chain. So with that in mind, it's not really going to help or bolster the Russian ability to fight a war against NATO, because while North Korea has an incredibly large military, they're poorly equipped, poorly trained, and not only that, they're still 5,000 miles away by land. And North Korea does not have the resources or the logistical ability to support a 5,000-mile-long supply line, meaning the Russians have to support the North Koreans that arrive in Europe, and that means that they may as well just be conscripting new Russians into the Russian army, because they're still having to supply all of the food, equipment, and munitions and arms for these soldiers to fight. So it won't really be changing much of anything if they were to try and get into a major war with Europe, beyond the manpower side of things, and that isn't really that difficult of an issue to fix in Russia if they really wanted to. They could just fully mobilize in the Russian Federation, and that would largely fix the problem that the North Koreans would be trying to attempt to fix by just sending manpower to Russia as a whole. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, but once again, it's just my opinion, and sometimes the analysis isn't always perfect, but we try and make it as close to perfect as we can. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the middle of the East and talking about what's going on down there.
All right, so we do have a question from Lord Cog, who said, what does backing down look like for Pakistan, and what is India demanding of them?
Right now, I actually haven't heard of any demands from India. They're just simply stating that they're punishing Pakistan for what happened at Palagram. So I don't even know what Indian demands would be. But if Pakistan wanted to back down, they would withdraw their military forces from the border, ask the Indians to meet them at a diplomatic summit or a conference, and then see what Indian demands would be. If Indian demands are absolutely insane, like we want to kill 1 out of every 10 Pakistanis, then they'd have to go to war. But if their demands are something like the Pakistani government can no longer fund or support groups that are operating terrorist forces inside of India, then the Pakistanis could probably accept that and just simply stop funding those forces. That might be what Indian demands look like, but once again, we have not heard any official Indian demands at this point at all, rather than Modi saying, "We will track, find, and punish." So we really don't know, but it sounds like they're just trying to track, find, and punish anyone who supported those the terrorist forces that conducted the attack in Palagram, which appears to just be the government of Pakistan at this point. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least off of the information that we have right now. And also, Matthew, have you noticed that there's now a little parentheses on the Persian Gulf?
That's weird. Like, why?
I don't know. It's always been called the Persian Gulf, and now someone's trying to rename it to the Arabian Gulf.
Huh, that's weird. It's like, everybody wants to rename everything now. I just keep it the way it was. Like, it was totally fine.
Yeah, now this is just getting confusing. First, it was the Gulf of Mexico. Now it's going to be the Persian Gulf. I was like, is everyone going to rename everything? Is this going to become the Egypt Sea? Like, next, is this going to be the Egypt Sea? Is this going to be... Like, look, there's already an Arabian Sea. What's the point of the Arabian Gulf? That just gets confusing.
Yeah, it's very confusing, honestly. I say keep everything the same so we can just, like, keep up, because, honestly, it's getting so chaotic. The last thing we need now is name changes for everything.
Dude, next thing you know, the Bay of Bengal is going to be renamed the Bay of Bangladesh, or the Bay of Bang energy drinks, like, or something like that. It's like, I don't know. Like, honestly, man, this is actually just getting absurd at this point with the renaming stuff. Anyways, moving on from that, and on into the Middle East, we have had quite the news to cover today in the Middle East. And, of course, we have to start it off in western Yemen, near Ras Issa, because we were able to hear down here at the Ras Issa port that the U.S. Armed Forces were hitting it again. This was filmed by a Turkish vessel passing by pretty close to the shore, but take a gander. Looks like the fires are brewing again. Oh, the firepower of the Navy is pretty impressive.
Oo, gemiyi vuruyorlar.
Ooh.
Oh, jeez, man.
Of,
I
gemiyi
think they're
vuruyorlar.
having a bad day.
Allah'ım ya.
Vurmuyorlar dediniz.
Man, I like how the one guy said, "They're bombing the port." Like, did you hear that in the beginning?
Wait, do it again. Say it again real quick.
Listen.
They are bombing the pump.
Bro, he said, "They're bombing the pump." Like,
Why does he sound like he sounds like that bad pirate out of, like, Pirates of the Caribbean or something. He's Captain Jack Sparrow.
They're bombing the pump. Yeah, and then they blow it up right.
They are bombing the pump.
Bro, this crew was actually witnessing the shock and awe side of things. Anyways, moving on from that attack at Ras Issa. Once again, the U.S. airstrikes are proving to be minimally effective, so most likely take a ground operation to really root out the Houthis, but we're still bombing them nevertheless. Moving on from that, also, by the way, we do know that they're going to keep bombing them because we were able to get into the signal chat. I'm just kidding, by the way, and we did hear we're going to be bombing them for another 3 weeks. That's all a joke, by the way. Moving on from that and into the area of Muskrat in Oman, or its technical name, Muscat. We were able to see that the Witkoff talks are apparently falling apart, as the negotiations between Witkoff and the Iran's foreign minister have not yet moved to a level below 30,000 feet, meaning the talks are still far from addressing practical details. The deal is far from landing, if you want to put it that way. It sounds as though Witkoff is having circles run around him. And I just have to say, to be entirely honest with you folks, this isn't a political thing, but we honestly should expect that this guy is going to have circles run around him by the Russians and Iran, because the guy was in real estate before this, and he doesn't really know a lot about negotiating with foreign countries. So, this is kind of like taking a baby and then telling it to go fight Mike Tyson. It's like, that's just kind of, setting them up to get into a state of failure, or to get knocked out. So It appears that at this point, there's absolutely no ground being made with Iran on denuclearization, and the Iranians are just running circles around Witkoff, and Witkoff has a little bit too much pride to say that, and also he doesn't really have enough experience to be in that position. I just beg at this point that Witkoff is removed from all diplomatic negotiations, and they replace him with someone who actually knows what they're doing. It does not have to be someone who's just a 180 of Witkoff's beliefs or opinions, but somebody that just knows what they're doing and actually knows how to negotiate, because this guy does not, and it's becoming fairly clear at this point with what's going on in the Middle East and in Russia that he is the absolute worst negotiator. He's been at it now for months with both Russia and Ukraine, and we have seen that he has achieved quite literally nothing. He is still at square one 2 months later on both topics, and it's like a negotiator usually could have at least made some common ground in some way. Over 2 months, this guy hasn't done it on both of them over 2 months, so he ought to be removed and replaced with someone else. But moving on from that, we have also been able to see the damage to Bandar Abbas. Y'all want to see what happened when that rocket fuel exploded at Bandar Abbas yesterday? Because it makes Beirut look like it was child's play compared to the explosion and the damage that was caused here. Look at that.
Damn, man, that place looks like a nuclear wasteland after that.
Whoa, I mean, don't call it a Davy Crockett, but it looks like a nuclear wasteland.
That's a pretty big one right there. I think after reviewing all the footage from it, also look at the skill of those guys walking around compared to that damage. That's crazy right there. But I think this was actually smaller than the Beirut explosion. In fact, I think it was much smaller than the Beirut explosion, but still, this was very destructive, super bad.
It was super bad. I guess you could call it, Matthew, like the capital of Pakistan. It was Islamabad. But anyways, moving on to that. We did get to see that the fires were continuing in the port in different areas, even just hours ago. Take a gander at that.
اسکله شهید رجایی بار دیگر شعله ور شد.
That's the end of the clip right there, but that port is still cooking even at this point from the secondary fires that started from the initial explosions. What a shame for the Iranians. In the middle of this whole negotiating thing, not really working out for America, and that might mean that this kind of destruction will begin to spread throughout the rest of Iran. Maybe by America, maybe by someone else. Maybe the Israelis. Because it sounds as though Netanyahu is saying that Israel is going to attack Iran regardless. Netanyahu stated today that Israel will destroy Iran's nuclear reactors and enrichment facilities, whether America wants them to or not. And he reiterated this as Hal Rose throws in a $333 donation. Whoa! To the fundraiser.
Son. Let's go, Hal Rose.
He also reiterated this today by saying that Israel is not a vassal to the United States, and he used an instance with a Biden, who was the prior president, where the president of the United States, the former president, said not to do something, then Israel did it anyways because Israel is baller like that. But anyways, moving on from that, we also get to see that they're already starting to warm themselves up. They're starting to stretch the old legs, get the nice 5-iron ready for a good little swing by striking at Hezbollah in Beirut. They just did it today for funsies, and also once again to remind everyone that Lebanon is largely a terrorist state. But here's the clip. Oh, a little Hezbollah ammo dump got knocked out.
I like to see that they're eco-conscious. They have solar panels on the roof. You know what else is on the roof?
What's on the roof?
Rubble.
Man. Man, you know what else
Call
is on
them Barney Rubble because that roof's full of it.
You know what else is on the roof?
What?
2,000-pound JDAMs, going right through it.
Yes.
But, yes, I see you know your ordnance well. Good one. And you, sir, are you ready to receive my Israeli JDAM? How dare you, sir? Get your laser pod off of me. But anyways, moving on from that little clip right there and on out of that area, we are getting an idea, a general gist at this point, that there is going to be war in the Middle East as well. Because Israel is going to end up bombing Iran, whether America wants them to or not. And I have a feeling that America is not really going to protest that too much, because it looks like the talks are making it absolutely nowhere. And as the Iranians keep buying themselves time, they are still getting closer and closer to having a nuclear weapon of mass destruction. And so, with that, it is time for us to move on out of the Middle East and on up into Ukraine, because we finally made it, folks. We finally made it through every other thing that's happening in the world at this point to make it to Ukraine, the big ol' one, the one that actually started this whole channel way back years ago. I actually was talking to some people before I started the show. I said, isn't it kind of a little crazy, and I'm sure some of y'all have been around long enough to remember this, isn't it kind of crazy that the biggest thing that was going on for like a whole year and a half was the war in Ukraine, and there was quite literally nothing else going on? And now at this point in the modern day, we're covering the war in Ukraine, the war in the Middle East, the war that's happening in India. We're also covering the tensions between North and South Korea. We're also covering the whole situation between China and Taiwan, as it appears inevitable that they will invade in a couple of years. We're also covering China invading a Vietnamese island. We're also covering the U.S. Going into a trade war with China and possibly a larger war as a result of that. We have covered the death of Pope Francis. We covered the death of Queen Elizabeth. I mean, we've absolutely been covering the whole 9 yards as of recently. It's actually crazy to think how much has changed over just 3 years. It's going on into 4 now of news coverage. And back in the good old days, which actually seems kind of a little bit weird to say it was just the Ukraine war that was going on. Now there's at least 4 different things going on in major form at all given moments of the day. But anyways, moving on from that, it is time for us to get on into Ukraine. But before we do, Matthew actually has thrown in a very interesting poll, and his name is Vladislav. But nevertheless, today Netanyahu committed that Israel will destroy Iran's nuclear facilities, and will the U.S. respond? And a lot of people have been saying that no, Israel is free to do whatever. Some others are saying that the U.S. probably sanctioned this act, and some others are saying the U.S. will punish Israel. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so now that Netanyahu is committed to destroying Iran's nuclear facilities, whether or not the U.S. wants it or not, how is the U.S. going to respond to that? So 54% said no, Israel is free to do whatever it wants, and there will be no U.S. response, while 28% said the U.S. probably sanctioned that act, and 8% said the U.S. will punish Israel. And if you do recall, the U.S. president said, I believe 3 or 4 days ago in a press conference, he said that the United States is not going to be dragged into the war with Iran just because Netanyahu wants to do it. But at the same time, though, he is not going to restrain Netanyahu from going in and doing that on his own if he wants to do it. So I think, generally speaking, the U.S. doesn't mind if Netanyahu goes in and does it. I think they prefer to talk it out. But of course, the talks are not being very productive, and Witkoff is certainly not helping the issue. So there's no productive talks, and they're basically playing the administration along. I think most people are seeing that, and even the administration is kind of admitting that themselves. So I would say that Israel's free to do whatever it wants, and I think they're probably going to do this. And there's already some people speculating that Israel was responsible for this major port explosion that just took place, which was the chemical that China sends over for Iran to develop ballistic missiles. So that was speculation. We don't know for a fact if Israel was behind it or not. Right now, it's just speculation, but it could have been. So I think Israel might pull it off. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to agree. I think the Israelis are going to pull it off. Largely, they kind of get a little bit of a blank check for reasons to be able to do what they want, so they'll most likely be able to just knock out Iranian nuclear and research facilities, and not much will come out of it. We'll just go, good on them. So with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. But it's now time for us to get on into the Ukraine war proper. Let us move on up in there, because we were able to hear today that the Russians have laid out new conditions for a ceasefire. Once again, they're only simple terms. Putin will completely cease fire, like he's the one actually shooting the gun, if no more weapons are delivered to Ukraine, and if the Ukrainian armed forces do not use the truce to rearm. And that was according to Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, today. The horse.
The horseman.
The horseman, as we call him. He's a miracle of science. He was able to be born from a woman and a horse. So it's a very interesting kind of a thing. But beyond that, back in the day, these kinds of guys didn't work at the Russian Foreign Ministry. They worked at the Freak Show, which technically still was the Russian Foreign Ministry. But beyond that,
you know, the weird thing is that horse does not come with papers. Lavrov, he comes with no papers, but that horse will ask you for papers that you have, but not his own.
Man, you know, actually, he does come with papers, man. He comes with a pedigree because his dad was actually an Arabian horse. Did you know that?
I actually did not know that. No.
Yeah, actually is Arabian.
Equestrian?
Have you ever seen an Arabian horse?
No, I have not.
Let me go pull one up for you. These things look so stupid. Look at it.
Oh dear, that's terrible. Poor thing.
Yeah, that's why he looks so bad. That's why he looks busted. His dad is an Arabian horse, so a little bit of a rough one. But beyond that, actually, Matthew, his dad had a long and storied history with a certain Roman empress, Catherine the Great. But we won't talk about that because that is not PG enough for the show. Nevertheless. And I'm not kidding about that, y'all. Y'all think that might just be some sort of like a warped joke. There's actually a little bit of truth to that whole joke if you know a little bit about the history of Catherine. I'm not even going to get into that, but if y'all want to look into that, don't. But you will be scarred for life. Nevertheless, though, we were able to hear that once again the Russians are saying to enter a simple ceasefire, all the Ukraine simply has to do is pretty much give up. Because if y'all notice here, they are saying that Ukraine can't receive weapons and Ukraine can't use the truce to rearm, but there's nothing saying that Russia can't. So if a ceasefire begins, Ukraine's military freezes in time and place at that exact moment, but Russia's doesn't. So when the ceasefire ends, Russia will have a newly equipped, replenished army, and Ukraine will still have the worn out one that they had when the ceasefire went into effect. Pretty much allowing the Russians to spend the time rearming and getting ready to try and steamroll the Ukrainians once it's over, and pretty much putting the Ukrainians in the most disadvantageous position possible. It is quite clear that this is not going to be something accepted by the United States or the Russian Federation at any point in the future. And we're already hearing that the U.S. administration is starting to view the Russians negatively, including Putin, and that is also coming out from multiple different senators, secretaries of state, and other people who have been involved quite intimately with the current president's stance with the Russian Federation in terms of negotiations. Moving on from that, though, and into our other news that we were able to get in Moscow, we actually got the guest list, folks, for the May 9th Victory Day Parade that's coming around this year. It's getting shorter every year. Look at this. There's like absolutely nobody on it. And also, it's like the usual suspects, man. Xi Jinping, he's going to be there. Alexander Lukashenko, he's going to be there. Look, even the leader of Brazil is going to be there.
Honestly, man, this is also there's Maduro. Look at that. What a
Look
guy,
at that.
Maduro. Is that the fellow from who's that over there? Is that Fico or Fico, whatever his name is? Oh, look, it's
Yeah.
Vucic. It's Vucic too. The whole roster. It's the whole gang. Lukashenko, the whole gang. There's a fellow there. I don't recognize his name, but is that the Vietnamese guy coming in too?
Yes, that is To Lam from Vietnam.
Yes. Looks like a nice roster here. A nice roster of people you'd want on your team if you were fighting a world war.
Yes. We all know them as the winners, folks. Palestine. They actually got the leader of Palestine. His name is Mahmoud Abbas. He's going to be there. We always know that they're winners, you know. We also have Milorad Dodik. What a last name right there. Coming in from the Republic of Srpskij. What the hell is the Republic of Srpskij? Because they have Serbia right now. What is that, actually? What country is that?
I don't even know, to be honest with you. I have no idea.
What in the hell? I don't even know. So this guy is coming from a non-existent country at this point. But we also have Alexander Vucic, who is from Serbia. We also have Robert Fico, who is from Slovakia. And we also have Zmonali Rahmon, who is from Tajikistan. We also have Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Vietnam, Belarus, Burkina Faso. You know, remember that little country that had the coup and the guy with the red beret took over and he started conducting all these crimes against humanity? He's going to be there. The guy from Brazil, Belarus, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and also Abkhazia.
Yeah. And also, I've heard that I think the Taliban is upset because, you know, the Taliban is Russia's new friend. They're the new friend of Russia now. So apparently they didn't get an invite. So the Taliban is protesting and they're upset because they wanted to join the roster of world-class villains and they weren't included.
And it does appear that is the case. Also, man, I like how there's a double asterisk against the guy where I said his country doesn't exist. And some people are trying to say it's maybe Bosnia. I'm doubting that because this doesn't say Bosnia. This says Rezulbija Blinka Serbsky, and I've never heard of that country before because usually the names of countries in Russian are just like it's the anglicized form but Russified, like if to put it that way. Because Armenia in Russian is Armeni, like Armeni. Something like that. It's very close to what it actually is in English. And like Cuba literally is just Cuba. Like it's very, very similar to the English form. I've never heard of this country though. So
honestly, man, this entire roster here is like it's like someone in the Kremlin told somebody, go gather the worst sons of bitches you can possibly find from the entire world, and let's just bring them here for a convention, and let's see how it goes. This is honestly a horrific list of people, by the way. Like some of these people are a little bit lighter than the other ones. Some of them are lightweights when it comes to being a villain, but some of these people are horrific on this list right here.
You got like a super villain extraordinaire Xi Jinping from bro, look at so the Russians actually didn't have, by the way, I want to put this out there as well because some may not know this. China is actually old enough in Russian memory to have its own special name, like one of the few countries that actually does, because the rest of them are just the Russified Anglican version of the name. China in Russia is called Kitai. Not kidding, that's how it's pronounced. Very weird kind of pronunciation, but the only one that's actually unique, because the rest of them you can read and it actually sounds close to English. But Xi Jinping is going to be there. But also, someone who isn't going to be there that I'm kind of shocked about? Kim Jong-un. He's not going to be there.
Yeah, that's right. I think it could be because the travel arrangements. He's always a little bit paranoid about leaving because he can't take his like armored train or something like in a short notice. Yeah, the Taliban's not there. The North Koreans aren't there. Let's see. I feel like there's somebody else. Let's see. Nobody from India appears to be going. That's kind of interesting. And
nobody from Pakistan.
I can't really think of. Yeah, nobody from Pakistan. Well, I guess they're a little tied up, so that might excuse India and Pakistan a little bit. But it seems like there's some other people missing that I'm not thinking about for some reason. They're missing a couple of people.
Man, this actually, man, the reason why Kim Jong-un isn't there, because this is the bastard convention, and he's got to wait for the super bastard convention, which will be the Taliban and North Korea and everyone else. So they gotta have a special little meeting for those guys, because Putin gets along with them a little bit more than these guys.
Iran.
Oh,
also,
yeah, they're not there, are they?
Nobody's there. They're scared of the helicopters. Like they've ever since Ricey or whatever his name was fell out of the sky on the helicopter. They've been scared to go abroad. Like that, I think that pretty much like horrified them from leaving their country at that point. So I think they're sitting this one out.
Man, bro, literally the only countries that have ever materially supported Russia directly, Iran and North Korea, aren't going to be here. It's like that says something a little bit about this whole thing. But anyways, it is time for us to move on. Also, man, the Taliban probably wasn't invited because of the whole bad blood thing. Because before they were the Taliban, they were the Mujahideen, and they beat the Soviet Union in the Soviet-Afghan war. So maybe they're not there for that reason.
Yeah, it could be. Also, does Bashar al-Assad not get an honorable mention? Like, he's just totally knocked off the list. Like, he's no longer relevant. And also, where's Orban? Like, he's not on the list either.
Dude, because Assad doesn't have a country anymore, he's going to be in the nosebleeds, like, further back in the bleachers. He's not a special guest anymore. He's just somebody. But still, what a list. Also, someone said Daniel Ortega of Nicaragua is in there. Yeah, that's something interesting. He's not there. But let's see. Also, a lot of people are saying that this guy from the Republic of Srpska actually it's a little area in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So it's not officially a country, but, they're just running the convention of the sons of bitches. So, he's one of them. So they're bringing him in. It's like bringing in the governor of Alabama, or something like that to one of these sorts of things and calling them a guest of honor, which I honestly think that's like just getting a little bit low down on the levels there, to be a guest of honor. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on from the guest list, which is plenty of entertainment in its own right. I mean, like, who can lie about that? Like, who can't lie about that? This is just hilarious. Also, what the hell is up with this guy, Mahmoud Abbas? What is up with his face? Like, hold up. I want to go look at that really quickly. Jesus, y'all. What is up with this guy? Hold up.
Let's see him.
Bro, he's literally Mr. Potato Head.
Dang, he actually looks like less swollen in this picture. I wasn't going to say anything about it because I don't know what's up with the guy, but his face looked like he got stung by bees in both cheeks, like in that one picture that Russia took of him. It's like, what happened to him?
Oh? Yo!
Oh,
Yo,
Okay.
yo, bro, you pulled an Elon, like, yo, like, no way, bro, it's crazy. Look at him, bro.
He's just getting a little excited.
This is him calling the waiter over to get another donut.
I thought he was flipping somebody off for a minute. I was going to say, wow, this dude's like savage. He's at the conference flicking people off.
Dude, he honestly, bro, he languishes as if he's consumed the whole donut and there's none left. But still, beyond that, I guess this guy's the sit-in for Kim Jong-un because they already had a chair rated for his weight, so they just brought him in as the replacement. But anyways, moving on from that and out of that bit of news in Moskva, it is time for us to move on into the war itself, because the war itself is warring up nicely. But before we get on into that war, I do have to say that the U.S. president has said that he is very disappointed with Putin and is suggesting a strong response at this point. A lot of people are putting in their thoughts. And it seems as though a lot of people are starting to say U.S. might start pivoting on them Russians. And others are saying that the U.S. is just bluffing the Russians again, just doing a little sneaky on them. And others are saying that it might be a little slap on the wrist. Hold up, let me slap on the wrist. There we go. Hopefully they picked up in the mic. And some others are saying that they're unsure and undecided on this. But Matthew, are people thinking that the tides are changing against the Russians and that the turns are about a table?
So this one is all over the place. It looks like nobody's really sure about what's going to happen. But now that the U.S. president says he's very disappointed with Putin and he suggests a very strong response, it looks like 38% said that the United States is about to pivot on Russia very strongly and go very negative against Putin, while 28% said the U.S. is simply bluffing Russia once again, and 24% said it's maybe just a slap on the wrist. And here is my big, bold prediction. I've been seeing over the last 24 hours a lot of the president's allies in the Senate and the House. They are coming out and publicly bashing and attacking Putin, which is something that so far they've refrained from doing for whatever reason. So I have a strong suspicion that in the next week or week and a half, we are about to see a permanent pivot against Russia in a negative way, and it might permanently close the door for any type of relations between Putin and the current U.S. administration. That is the big, bold prediction. That's a big prediction to make because right now there's a very unpredictable people at the helm of the United States. But I think we're reaching a point where the shenanigans really can't continue because Putin is making it impossible to continue talking. So I think I'm with the 38%, and I think we're about to see a very big pivot. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree with the 38% as well. I think there's going to be a pivot. I think you pretty much hit it down on the nail. There's not really a lot for me to add, seriously. But also, Matthew, I think it started to pivot when the president said, Vladimir, stop! Like he was Michael Jackson up on stage, you know, when he did that music video where he just grabbed the guy's rifle and like lowered it down and then started dancing and like all the wars stopped. Or like, you know, like a big thanks to Banksy for painting that, you know, like stopping all wars because of that shit ass Banksy painting meme. You know, it's kind of the same thing. I think that's when the flip started because at this point, there's really no way to keep going with a straight face, just act like the Russians are dealing with us seriously. They're treating us like idiots. And I think that that's starting to be picked up quite clearly at this point, that there's really no hope of having a negotiation with the Russians. So now we're just going to move back into the old way of things, which is where we're supporting the Ukrainians and we're sanctioning the Russians, probably even harder than we were before. So it looks like we're finally making it around to doing that, folks. It was just about 3 months of like just being absolutely on the edge of our seats, thinking that this whole thing was going to go bottoms up. But now it seems that everything might end up just returning back to status quo, or might even end up being more harsher on the Russians than before. Kind of like our original assessment that we made literally like a year and a half ago at this point. But still,
true that. Also, by the way, before we move on, just want to mention one more thing. Another big piece of news here is the mineral deal, that goofy minerals deal that it's like a bad X. It will not go away. Apparently, the United States is no longer requiring Ukraine to repay past aid to the United States in that minerals deal. So that was a huge holdup to it. And now the United States has officially dropped that requirement, meaning that the minerals deal is for future aid and it's not for past aid. So that's a very big deal. That takes away a lot of issues like the valuation of the equipment that was sent, and also, once again, how the minerals are being divvied up for stuff that was not really intended as debt. It was supposed to be a gift or something that was just given to Ukraine to defend their country without any strings attached. So that's another big sign that things are changing. And someone said, pivot to what? Like when you say the United States president is going to pivot against Russia, what do you mean? I mean sanctions, really, because there's still banking sanctions that can be put on Russia, and there's sanctions that permanently cut off all oil shipments to Europe via Russia to Europe. So that's something that could be done as well, and that could totally sink the Russian economy. And for some reason, Putin acts like he's really not scared of that. I guess he's bluffing, thinking the president's not going to do that. And I guess it's a fair gamble to take at this point, but I think it might be backfiring on Putin here in the next week and a half, because the statements coming out of the Senate from very loyal senators to the president indicates that the talking in the background is very negative against Putin, and it's really changing quick.
It really does sound like that, and I think that there will be a serious pivot to heavier sanctions and probably further Ukraine war support. But also, Matthew, I like how we removed the whole repaying us for the military support thing when we were like, Russia's a great friend, they're going to negotiate with us, you got to repay them. Wait a minute, the negotiations aren't going well? You don't have to repay us. In fact, have more guns, have more bombs. Like, you can start hitting the Russians.
Yeah, honestly, I'm shocked that they took that requirement out, because that was the whole reason there was all that fighting going on, was because of that one major aspect of the contract, was that they wanted repayment for past aid that was sent to Ukraine, which wasn't even debt. It was not ever structured as debt, but they were trying to make it into debt. And then they said that we sent 500 billion or 300 billion, some crazy number like that, which was nowhere close to the truth. So now that that's been wiped out, and now that there's statements being made that Putin might be in the hot seat, I'm thinking in my head, this sounds like something's about to change really quick. And for some reason, the U.S. administration keeps saying this 2-week timeline. They keep saying in 2 weeks, we'll know something. I think that means in 2 weeks, we'll know if Ukraine's signing that mineral deal. And in 2 weeks, we'll see Putin continues playing games. And that's when the pivot's going to take place. And it's going to be a permanent shutoff to talks. That's my assumption.
I think so, honestly. I think it's going to be a pretty interesting little shift that we see happening. It probably will be permanent until the Russians actually are the ones to try and initiate talks, and they're trying to do it reasonably. Or when Putin dies, which hopefully, like Zelenskyy says, Putin will die really soon. Like, he just keeps saying that, like this very, very ominous sounding, man. Like, he's just saying there, Zelenskyy, you know what I'm talking about, man. Zelenskyy will just come out at a press conference and be like, when do you think the war's going to end? And then Zelenskyy will just be like, you know, Putin's got a clock over his head, and it's about midnight now. And it's like, what does he mean by this? Like, he just keeps saying it. Like, is he going to die naturally, or are they going to kill him? It's like, I don't know.
You know, I forgot to mention, but Putin should watch himself at night. I forgot to mention.
Bro, Zelenskyy sits there and says, when I go to bed, I sleep soundly. But for Putin, sleep with one eye open. You don't know what's coming.
Yeah, he's just coming out with those curveballs occasionally. Everybody's like, oh, okay.
Man, Zelenskyy would be sitting there. He'd be like, we really need a long-lasting peace. And that Smith & Wesson got me moving like an invasive species. And then it would be like, what? And then he would just move on back and, like, talking seriously. It's like, I don't know. But, dude, Budanov is, like, really, really doing that weird head thing of his again recently a lot every time I've seen him. So I think they got something cooking. You know, I think he's going to be
he's scheming.
Yeah,
if he's doing that chin thing where he's doing the receding chin line, like, routine with his face, Budanov's scheming, like, when he's doing that.
Dude, you know when Budanov is pushing his head far enough back that he's getting that double chin thing going, you know that he's got something diabolical cooking up in that head. Like, honestly, man, he's cooking up something nasty up there. Something crazy is about to happen, dude. Like, either the Kerch Bridge is going to get hit, or Putin's about to push up lilies. Like, it's one or the other. And I hope it's.
It's like those people, you know, when they start lying, their eyes like go up and to the left when they start lying. Like, there's like always a tell. It's like that's Budanov's tell. Like, the chin starts going back toward the neck.
Bro, let me go see if I can pull up a picture of him doing that. Because every time I say that to all of y'all, I feel like we need to, like, provide a picture so y'all know. Oh, dude, I gotta find a picture of this where he's doing this smug thing. Oh, damn, dude, how in the world did he never get the pictures of him on Google Images where he's doing this? Also, bro, why was he, like, absolutely, like, mogging in this picture, though, dude? Like, he was, like...
Man, I tell you what, Budanov out here, he's not messing around with those Russians. Tell you, he's always looking like he's scheming something.
The best picture I can get of him doing it is this one. He's not really doing it much at all there, but if y'all saw the pictures we've seen of him when he's, like, talking about the schemes, he pushes his head back a little bit, and he ends up, like, forming this double chin. And, like, you know at that point he's speaking about something absolutely diabolical. But anyways, moving on from that, it is time for us to get on into the rest of the frontline news. Because we were able to hear in the Sudzha Oblast that the Russians had a little logistics base targeted today by the 92nd Brigade, and it looks like they took some pretty decent losses after some precise artillery strikes hit the facilities and wiped them out. And you can see that this is a heavily used facility, because just look at this. There is at least 10 actual full-sized Urals and Kamazes that are being being serviced in the bays of this motor pool. And the Ukrainians are about to wipe out the whole thing for the large part. When you see Russians walking around as the Ukrainians are saying this is about to be a little artillery operation. Oh, they just put up the skulls on screen, so I have a feeling that there's going to be some interesting stuff going on here. And here comes the first strike right on the corner of one of the buildings. A dead-on hit with the first hit, which is pretty impressive. Not a single ranging shot. Second hit hits dead on to the other facility. Looks like it blew out the entire midsection of it. I don't know what's up with the spastic, like, flames of hell edit going on here, but we can see them still targeting the facility. Smoke is now covering the entire thing, and that's the end of the clip, but still a very impressive hit nevertheless. Moving on from that, and towards to Gogolevka, we got to see the Ukrainians targeting and destroying Russian forces with a Stukna.
Бежать!
Here's some machine gun fire out there. Oh, are they cooking? You're Putin. We have to know. When the Russians cook, you go boot doodle it, dude.
Oh, no.
Putin, when you were growing up in the streets of St. Petersburg, didn't they used to call you Little Poonie? How did you know that?
Whoa, I'm blown away. How did you know? I'm so blown away.
You're Putin. We have to know. And look, I found this little record that you made in your first year in the KGB called Screams of the Damned. How do you like that?
You sound just like him. It's uncanny. You sound just like that guy.
Well, you're Enforcer Matt. We have to know. But anyways, moving
Oh my
on.
God! Like, man, you slid. How'd you find that, man? You slid.
Well, you're Enforcer Matt. We have to know. Enforcer Matt, isn't it true that when you were a kid, you used to be called the Little Bugman?
Oh, yo, how you know that, man?
You're Enforcer Matt. We have to know. We have to know. Oh, what's he doing? Oh, what's he doing? He's running away. No, come back. Oh, come on. That's not right. But anyways, moving on from that, we are going to be moving on to the next clip where we got to see the D-30 hitting him. And also, it seems as though a lot of people were pretty impressed that I was able to pull off a Nardwar. I don't know how I did that. I literally did no practice on that one day, and I just, like, threw that one straight out, and that was, like, 3 years ago, and I was like, no way. It's like, I can just do Nardwar, easy.
Why does he call himself Nardwar?
I don't know, man, but the first time he actually ever did anything, man, he tried to ask the Canadian Prime Minister about, like, riot control and why they were spraying people with mace, and the Canadian Prime Minister was like, what is mace? And he was like, you know, pepper spray. And then the Prime Minister said, oh, I don't do pepper spray. I just like salt and pepper. And then he just moved on from the question. I was like, what? I was like,
I think it was the way he asked it. He was like way too jovial about it and on a serious topic. He was like, why'd you guys go out there and spray those people in the face with the pepper spray? What, don't you, it was a little too hot for them? And the guy was like, I don't know if I understand the tone of that question. It's a little bit too jovial for the topic, so I was going to joke. Like, I maybe thought he was joking or something.
Dude, Nardwar would be the kind of guy to torture you and be like, we're about to peel your skin off and attach a cathode to it so we can electrocute you. And you'd be sitting there thinking he's kidding with you. You'd be like, oh, yeah, you are, yeah, sure. And then he'd start doing it. You'd be like, what the hell, man? Like, what are you doing?
But man, look at these Russians, though. They're actually getting it.
Yeah, they're
dropping bombs around the Russians' heads. We're looking at a BMP going down hard.
Wow, the Russians, they're dropping bombs right on top of them in this exact position. Whoa, Bliat, how did you know? Well, you're the Russian army. We have to know. But anyways, moving on from that.
You're dumb Vatnik. We have to know.
You stupid Gopnik. We have to know. You're a Gopnik. That's what we do. But anyways, moving on from that, we also get to see them striking Russian positions in the Kursk Oblast once more. We can see a Ural down there. And we can see here the drone lining itself up for the hit and coming on in. We see it flying on in. And a boom shaka like it did on the nail. Look at that.
Man.
Man, I like every single time we just like joke around and like have a good laugh. Someone always has to ask like the union obligated question. Are you guys on drugs? Unlike others, I actually don't require drugs to have a good time. I just have a good time naturally. So the answer is no.
Are you on drugs?
What is this? A Saturn burger?
I've about had enough of this. Oh, you guys must be on drugs or something. And no way you just laugh like that without drugs. No way.
No way
Said the
that you,
depressed man.
no way that you actually have fun with your life without having to be on an insane amount of illegal narcotics. Like that's one person every night. But anyways,
Like, I remember the last time I laughed like that, I was on well, I'm not gonna say that. Never mind. I'm gonna pass on that actually.
man, I was on that galaxy gas on God or something like that. But anyways, we got to see the border guards hitting some Russians up in the Sumy area. We see them just slamming them. Look at them go.
Here, here's the thing we'll do. We'll make a deal with the bots. You can get away with taking a nice, good crack at us, but you must make a donation to the fundraiser to help those in Ukraine. That's a fair deal. That's a fair trade.
Dude, kind of like that one guy who threw in like that $50 super chat like a day ago, and he was like, "Why don't y'all shut up, you dumbasses?" And then got banned. Like that guy, it's like, why? It's like, why? We were having fun, and then you came in and you rained on our parade. What's going on?
The offer is open, by the way. Like, if any bots would like to take a crack and make a donation, feel free.
Man, I'm telling you. You know what, man? You know what? We should make sure that no one ever asks that question again. We should be depressed the entire show, man. Let's go. Well, we can see the Russians getting hit here again. They just keep getting hit further down and down, just like my life. Oh, God. Oh, the pain won't stop.
Oh, man. It seems like they just can't catch a break. Oh, man.
The pain won't stop.
My life's like the Russians. One day I'm winning and one day I'm losing, but there's like 5 losing and 1 winning. Oh, man.
My family, my dreams at night, they keep telling me the car crash wasn't my fault and I gotta let it go, but I just can't. And the voices in the back of my head, they keep coming and they won't stop. But anyways, moving on from that and on into our location unknowns, we were able to see some Russians. Oh, apparently that's a little too spicy for all y'all. Correction there. We were able to see the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours, and those losses were something. Oh, no Bobcats.
0 Bobcats again. What the hell's going on? It's been a drought for days and days and days. 0 Bobcats. That's insane.
Man, and of course, Miss Disa, the keeper of the records, was able to put in a general summary as troop losses continue to decline, but still over 1,000 per day. The categories are close to 7-day average levels. Vehicle losses are steady at about 130 to 150 per day, and artillery average is about 50, which is quite impressive. And Miss Disa, I gotta agree with your qualitative assessment. That is actually quite impressive indeed. Moving on into the news, or more so the casualty report, we were able to see 1,030 Russian soldiers wounded and killed in the past 24 hours, along with 5 APCs, 136 supply trucks, 8 main battle tanks, 42 artillery pieces, 114 drones, and 1 MLRS. And that was it, but it was still a pretty decent day. Moving on from that, though, and out of that bit of news, it's time for us to move on into the front lines themselves, near to Kupiansk, or more so, Kupiansk-Veslovy, which actually has a very impressive rail yard in it. It's quite a significant one. Look at that, Matthew. The rail yard of it. Very impressive, actually, with loads of maintenance facilities and all kinds of magical things to keep the Ukrainian railroad running. This actually is a strategically important area for that reason, but due to its locality of the front line, that rail yard has largely been abandoned for most of the war. Moving on from that, though, we were able to see a Russian attack in this area stop, but that was a little too spicy, so we won't show you that one. But we did get to see a Russian position getting hit with a TM-62 anti-tank mine dropped inside the enemy's dugout. We see the Ukrainians running on up here, getting ready to drop that little anti-tank mine.
They're creeping on him. Creeping on this ant mound right here.
Bro, watch out. Chicken jockey. I was trying to figure out how to like say creeper, like the Minecraft creeper. And I was like, I don't think he ever said that in the movie, so I just got to say chicken jockey. Bro, there goes the mine.
These guys lobbed that tank mine in there like it was just like a loaf of bread.
Bro, very casual. And there they go. They're running off, man. They don't want to be around when that thing goes up because these things go up pretty violently, folks. Y'all are about to find that out right here. a few moments later. And there it goes.
Oh, jeez,
Oh.
man. Took the whole ant mound down. That was worse than those ant farm things that those young kids like to shake up and torture the ants.
Bro, they don't torture them, they kill them. When that happens, they get killed. But moving on, well, some of them get killed, some of them survive, but most of them will end up dying anyways because their whole ability to get food is pretty much messed up at that point. But anyways, moving on from that, and down towards the Lehman direction, we also were able to see the Ukrainians knocking out some super cams.
Looks like a crappy cam to me.
Well, the Ukrainian drones don't have the super cams on them. It's the Russian drones that have the super cams on them. Don't be
No, I'm saying they
confused.
look crappy, man. Not the video quality. I'm saying these super cam drones look crappy.
Oh, well, I completely missed what you were trying to say right there. Say it better. I'm just kidding. But yeah, they look pretty crap. Oh, it looks like they almost missed that one, but they still got it. But they're going to get that one, and they're going to get this one.
This is that drone-on-drone violence that we were warned about.
Oh, this one's pixelized.
Nasty drone. They got to cover that one up.
Man. We see them getting another one here. They got 10 of them in total over this whole clip. I got to tell y'all, folks, the bots tonight have been terrific. It's been quite the show to see them come in because all of them just say the same thing. It's literally just clickbait, and that's it. Like if it's not like Indian bots coming in and like encouraging a genocide on Pakistan, or Russian bots coming in encouraging a genocide on the Ukrainians, or Chinese bots coming in and saying that nothing happened at Tiananmen Square in 1986 or 1984 or whenever it happened. It's always just the bots that come in and just say clickbait, and that's it. It's been droves of them tonight, and it's like, I don't know how they get away with that, because it's like we have proof and sources for everything we're saying. So it's like I don't really know what they're trying to prove here, because it's not like we're just coming up with stuff. It's actually happening. But anyways, moving on from that and on to our next clip. Further down in Toretsk, we got to see them hitting the Russians with the drones. And take a look at this. This is the Thunderbirds, like the air show demonstration team, but with drones.
But these birds actually bring real thunder, though. They're not just like for show. Like these are actually like, they're going down.
Bro, they bring that thunder. They bring that We Too boom. That We Too classic boom. You remember that, Matthew?
Is that the people with the chicken bake?
No, Matthew. That's the, let's see. Lean on back, and strut. You remember that stupid, old thing? You remember that?
Not really. I thought you were talking about the chicken bake people. Those people that go into Costco and go film around the food cafeteria and stuff like that.
Oh my goodness, dude. I saw something absolutely terrible. Speaking of those people, dude. Oh my God. Someone had a family member that died, dude, and they paid, they just got hit right there. They paid them to make a special video for the person that died. And the guy was like, oh man, it's terrible to hear that Martha passed away. We're to give Martha 5 booms. And then they sat there and went, boom, boom. I was like, oh my God. I was like, that is terrible. I was like, I would have refused to do that. I would have been like, no, I'm not doing that. That's crazy. But dude, that was horrendous. I'll have to pull it up for you after the show, dude, to find that. But that was absolutely terrible. And man, they are absolutely getting these Russians, by the way, just getting back on topic here.
Yeah, I hope those guys are getting paid by Costco or something. Otherwise, that's just kind of cringy if they're not getting paid by Costco and they're shilling for them like that.
Dude, they made a whole career off of getting paid by their viewers to shill for Costco. It's actually kind of a little crazy about that. But we also got to see the Russians surrendering, or the Russian surrendering here. 2 of them surrendering.
The Russians, they're coming out. They're getting handcuffed. And
my English skills are just deteriorating with time, man. Every year it's getting worse at this point.
Look at them Russians walking out. They got no time for stalling because they got to go rushing and right to the surrendering bay.
Dude, look, it's MC Rushing. Wow, look at him.
Look at him.
Bro, he's snitching on his bros. They're like, who did it? And they both pointed at each other. He did it.
Man, These people right here would snitch quicker than like a convict that just got picked up off the street for a Big Mac that you've ever seen.
Dude, honestly, man, a lot of those gangsters, man, they're like, bro, don't touch me, man. And then once the cops got me in handcuffs, bro, chill, I'll tell you everything. Bro, it's Tyrone. He's the one. He's got all the drugs. It's like, bro,
Man.
you haven't even gotten off the street. So you
know how many of those criminals have given up their partners and stuff like that over a Big Mac? Like literally, like just one Big Mac sandwich will make them give up their whole crew. Like I've seen that like on body cam so many times.
Dude, I've seen that a million times. Dude, honestly, man, the ones that I find funny, though, are, like, the gangsters that are, like, all tough and stuff, and then the cops are like, you're under arrest, and they're like, F you, pig, I'm not under arrest, and then they slam him on the ground, and as soon as he gets slammed on the ground, yo, calm down, please, you're hurting me, stop, it's like, bro, it's like, man, they went from a gangster to that, like, it's like, bro, they were, like, punching at the cops and stuff before they got put on the ground, and then as soon as they get put on the ground, they start crying and everything, it's like, that's always interesting to me, but anyways, moving on from that and into Pokrovsk, we also get to see the Ukrainians repelling a Russian attack down here today. We're going to be muting that. But what were you about to say, Matthew?
I just want, oh.
Oh. See them moving on up, clearing out the area. Oh, it's nothing. It's just a, a backpack. But we can see them here continuing to move on forward. Man, I don't know why you were doing that. It was just simply some field equipment out there in the street.
I've been feeling like real, like, scratchy on the throat. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, exactly, man. Like, see, there's just some more field equipment there. There's just field equipment all over the place.
Stop the video.
Moving on from that and on into our next clip, we also got to see the Russians getting hit with a little MLRS barrage right here. Okay, we're going to be muting that. I don't know what that was. That sounded like Nyan Cat and something else mixed together. But we can see them firing the MLRS at the Russians. Man, oh, buddy, they're hitting them. And that's the end of the clip right there. And also, User92 said, I know my rights. Every person that doesn't know their rights. Exactly. Like, there's so many people who say that they know their rights, and then they're making up their rights. Like, it's like, you actually have some pretty decent rights, but it's not what you're saying they are. It's like, that's just crazy. Like, they'll be like, I have the right to resist arrest if I don't agree with it. It's like, no, you don't. It's like, you don't have a right to that. It's like, never. But anyways, moving on from that and into Huilopol, we also got to see the 110th Mechanized Brigade repelling a Russian assault, which apparently was a little spicy. I'm really hard. I really have a bad of eyesight on that these days, of picking out the ones that are a little too spicy, because to me, they all look fine, and then for some reason, some people are like, nope, too spicy. But anyways, the 125th Brigade was taking out some Russians down in Zaporizhia today. Look at that, they got Kipper the dog up here as their unit emblem.
These antenna things on the front of these drones are getting more and more weird looking as time goes by.
Bro, this is like the finger ring thing where you put one finger ring inside the other finger ring. That's how they had that one set up.
Yeah, kind of like that. That's a good point. They just hit something.
Factual Repealing says, seems most people don't understand that you can film in public. You can film from a public sidewalk, anything within view. Entirely legal in the United States. And a lot of people don't understand that. It's actually crazy that people think that they have a right to privacy in the middle of the public. It's like you don't. And as a matter of fact, you really don't have a right to privacy in your house if the curtains are open. I mean, if your curtains are open and someone's standing on a public sidewalk and they have a camera, they can just zoom in and take pictures of the inside of your house as long as it's within plain view, and that's totally fine as well.
I think it actually depends, actually, because if you come up to like a sidewalk with like a really like high-powered zoom lens or something with the intention of zooming through somebody's window to snap photos of them or something, that could actually be an invasion of privacy, actually.
Really? I always heard that it wasn't.
It just depends. It all depends. If you're just like standing on a sidewalk with your iPhone or something like that, taking pictures, then that's whatever. But if you're like showing up with like like a telescope or something to like look through somebody's window from the sidewalk, that wouldn't work.
That's interesting right there. Pixel Lord said, in Canada, you have the right to privacy. Well, you have the right to privacy in the United States. It's just that there's no expectation of privacy in the public. We see them here getting hit pretty hard right down there.
Someone said peeping is not legal. Yeah, that's true. Like, for example, if you have a drone, like all these DJI drones that fly around these days, you can't fly them down and start looking through people's windows of their homes, like, you know, right outside of their window, because that would be an illegal thing to do that.
And it's kind of crazy how many people do that too. Because like I remember there were some drones around Enforcer HQ 1.0 that would pop up here and there occasionally. Apparently, I never saw them, but we heard of them from others. But anyways, we can see them still slamming the Russians right there. And that's the end of the clip, but still very nice to see and good to know. Moving on from that, though, it is time for us to get on up to Kyiv and listen to that speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 1159 of the war. And look at it. It's Zelenskyy in the back rooms. It's just a void. he's standing in the sixth dimension making this address. So without further ado, here's the speech. Speech!
Дорогі українці, українки, сьогодні було вже кілька доповідей головкома Сирського по ситуації на фронті. Наші військові, вони продовжують виконувати завдання на території Курської та Білградської областей. Зберігаємо нашу присутність на території Росії. Покровський, всі напрямки на Донеччині. Я хочу подякувати нашим воїнам за стійкість, просто молодці. Особливо хороші результати у 3-ї бригади оперативного призначення Національної гвардії на Покровському напрямку. Наші позиції тримаємо сильними, щоб були всі можливості для правильної дипломатії. Росіяни багато говорять про свою начебто готовність йти на американські пропозиції, але поки що жодних приготувань російської армії до реальної тиші не фіксується. Навпаки, за час після Великодня окупант відновив звичну для них штурмову активність. А вже ж ціною значних втрат росіяни намагаються просуватися. І кожен день таких боїв на фронті доводить абсолютно очевидно, що Росія дійсно намагається обманути світ, обдурити Америку та інших і надалі затягувати цю війну. І тому потрібен тиск. Без тиску не обійтись, щоб росіяни пішли на всі кроки, пішли на все, що необхідно, щоб зупинити війну. Вчорашні зустрічі у Ватикані та Римі підтвердили, що наші партнери розуміють, що відбувається. Україна готова рухатись максимально швидко у дипломатії. Ми 47 днів тому погодились на американську пропозицію безумовного припинення вогню. І згодом ми дали росіянам наші власні пропозиції припинити удари по цивільних об'єктах, хоча б це. Але вони там в Москві відповідають шахедами, ракетами, артилерією і новими штурмами. Потрібна належна відповідь від світу, відповідь новими санкціями та ще більшим тиском. Звісно, саме Америка може зробити найбільш відчутні кроки, відчутні для Росії. І тільки за ніч сьогодні росіяни застосували проти України майже 150 ударних дронів. За час від 11 березня, коли Америка на перемовинах в Саудівській Аравії запропонувала повне і безумовне припинення вогню, росіяни застосували майже 8,5 тисяч авіабомб, майже 200 ракет різних типів, майже 3 тисячі шахедів. Абсолютна більшість з них по звичайним містам, по цивільним мішеням. Це потрібно припинити. Росія повинна зупинити удари. І безумовно, я дякую всім у світі, хто нам в цьому допомагає, хто допомагає робити дипломатію сильною. І хочу сьогодні відзначити особисто наших українських рятувальників, весь колектив ДСНС України. всі комунальні служби, які залучаються, нашу Національну поліцію України. Я дякую всім, хто рятує життя кожного дня. Тисячі людей по всій нашій державі працюють для того, щоб якнайшвидше допомогти, щоб врятувати якнайбільше життів. Окремо відзначу рятувальників з Києва та Київщини, які працювали на цьому тижні після російського удару. Олександр Бобко, Олександр Кравчук, Геннадій Петрівський, Юрій Шпак, працівники 10-ї державної пожежно-рятувальної частини. Я хочу вам подякувати всім. Олександр Вороневич, Руслан Кравченко, Олег Рибалко, Олександр Ухатенко, 18-та державна пожежна рятувальна частина. Дякую вам. Дуже дякую. Працівники мобільного рятувального центру швидкого реагування ДСНС України. Іван Мірошниченко, Іван Коваль, Олександр Шило, Анатолій Щербина, Михайло Кудренко, Ігор Литвиненко, Дмитро Хорошок. Дякую вам. І також працівники аварійно-рятувального загону спецпризначення з Київської області. Це Денис Ткаченко, Олександр Микода, Іван Робол. Дякую. Хлопці з Черкаської області, теж працівники аварійно-рятувального загону, що допомагали саме тут, у Києві. Вадим Бугай, Олег Гереш, Андрій Пантелеєв. Дякую. Дякую кожному і кожній, хто працює заради наших людей. Дякую всім вам, хто захищає Україну. Слава Україні!
And heroes
Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on the day of 1159 of the news of the war in Ukraine. And it is time for us to move on into one of the next segments of the stream. It's an incredibly fun segment because we get to talk to all of y'all. And boy, howdy, folks, we are going to have a fun time with that because we love getting to talk to all of y'all, to chit-chat with all of y'all about all of the fun and interesting topics that are presented to us day in and day out. And we absolutely love it. We love to see it. And so, but with that in mind, before we do, I saw someone say this ain't a law. I just want to put this out there. Like, someone said, if you ask someone to stop recording you and you politely ask them not to, unless if it's in proof of a crime, they have to blur you. There is absolutely no law anywhere that says that. If you are in public, it is perfectly fine to film you. And there's no way that you can ask anyone not to film you and have them do anything. Like, nobody is obligated to do squat in that kind of an instance. Like, if you come up to someone and tell them, hey, stop filming me, and they say no, best to leave it there because there is absolutely nothing in the world that can make them stop filming you. So the only thing you can do from that point is just get enraged, possibly hit that person, and then get charged with battery for hitting someone for doing something that's entirely legal. America is fairly liberal when it comes to rights to privacy, or at least an expectation of privacy in the public. There is absolutely no expectation of privacy in a public area. So if you are on a public street, a public sidewalk, a public park, or anywhere that can be accessed by the general public that is not on private property, and you happen to be filmed, seen, or photographed in any of those areas, that is entirely legal. There is nothing that anyone can do about that. And if you try to make someone stop filming you and you call the police, all the police are going to do is come out and go, look, he has the right to be here and he has the right to do whatever he really wants, filming or taking pictures of anyone. So, that's what it is. Now, there's some different caveats with that. Like if someone just follows you around literally everywhere you go and they're taking pictures of you, that might start getting into stalking or harassment or something. But generally, you can do whatever you want in the public like that, and there's absolutely no expectation of privacy or that you have to blur someone out in the video. So with that, hope that does address it the best I can, and it is time for us to move on into all those questions. But before we do, we actually have some top donors that came in between the last segment and this one. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so the ones that we have not called off yet are Greg Carrier, who put in a $50 donation, and also Bob P, who put in a $50 as well. And thank you both, Greg and Bob, for being so generous as to donate to the fundraiser tonight. And a big thank you to everybody else as well for helping to get us up to $3,357 raised of the $2,500 goal. So we are now officially well above the goal, and that's fantastic to see. And a huge shout out to LSA for once again making that possible. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta say a massive shout out to all of y'all for supporting this fundraiser tonight, both the big donations and the small ones, because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, we would not be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it rolling. And so a huge shout out to all of y'all once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And also, I see some people saying some more crazy things, like not really crazy things, but like things that wouldn't really apply legally. Like someone said, but if you were being filmed and you ask a person to stop and they continue, is that not considered harassment? No, it's not. It's not at all. No, because they have a legal right to film in public. So if you ask them to stop and then they don't stop, that's not harassment at all. Honestly, if you keep telling them to stop, I mean, hell, you could start honestly getting into disorderly conduct, especially if you start to act really crazy about it, like, stop filming me, damn it! You know, like, you could probably get into disorderly conduct pretty quickly on that instead. So, no, like, if someone comes up to you in public and asks you to stop filming and you say no, that's the end of it. Like, that quite literally, legally is the end of it. You ask them to stop doing something that they are legally allowed to do. They said no, that's the end of it. So, with that, I hope that...
or like somebody to send the live chat, you have the right to shut the hell up and move along. Honestly, it's true though. Like without the accent and everything included in it, you do have the right just to move along. I've never understood why people get so offended about somebody recording somebody. It's mainly like government employees. Like government employees hate it if you walk in and try to record them, like in a government building or something. They go berserk. Like I have no idea why they go berserk either. But you put a camera near a government employee, it's like what is it, like kryptonite or something for them? It's like they go crazy. Like turn off the camera, sir. Get out of here. It's like, what the hell is the problem? It's like it's just someone filming with their phone or something. It's like, what are you so freaked out about? It's like it makes you wonder what they're doing to be so worried about being filmed like that. It's like you're creating suspicion.
Yeah, it really is like, it's like, what are y'all doing in here for y'all not to want someone in here filming? Like, what's going on? And it's like, they're really doing nothing. They're just doing their job. But the way they act, it always makes you suspicion. What are they doing inside of this building? But anyway, let's see. Let's see. James Green Coffee said, repeatedly asking someone to stop filming is harassment in itself. Yeah, kind of, you know, like, but you know, the cops will just show up and not do anything to anyone. They'd be like, look, this guy has a right to film. And, you know, so that's it. Just move on along. And then if you start to continue to harass the guy after that, then they might start to, you know, possibly say, hey, look, you're going to have to leave that guy alone or we're going to have to arrest you for harassment. That could happen. But, you know, it's just an interesting thing with how people, because I see people keep on coming in the chat and they have like these stipulations to how that is true except for this. And that's just not the case. If you were in public anywhere, you could film. Like for example, in Disney World, generally, it's an area heavily trafficked by the public. There is no modicum or expectation of privacy in Disney World. So, you know, while it's private property, like just to extend this to a private property example, while that is private property, there generally is just an expectation that you're going to have no expectation of privacy in most places inside of the Disney properties, Disney World. So, you know, there's no way that someone could just walk up to you and go, hey, can you stop taking pictures, asshole? Like, now, if someone from Disney itself, like representative of the Disney company or the Disney property came up and said, hey, I'm going to have to ask you to stop taking pictures of other people, that's private property. They have a right to tell you to stop, and then you have to stop. Or if you do not stop, then they have a right to tell you to leave the property, and then you have to leave the entire property. So that doesn't mean the Magic Kingdom. That means the entirety of the Disney parks. So you have to get off the property as soon as possible. So that's kind of how that works there as well. Like there's tests and different things that are applied to that sort of a thing to say where privacy is expected or not. Like obviously, privacy is expected within your own home. Like, you know, someone isn't just allowed to, you know, walk up to your windows on your private property and then start taking pictures of private areas of your house. There's obviously an expected modicum of privacy there. But in general, if you're in the public or if you're in an area where there isn't really an expected modicum of privacy, you can really take pictures or film however much you want. There's really not a lot that anyone can do about that. Because that's a let's see, what is that, Matthew? Is that a freedom of expression? What is that technically covered under?
And what's covered? Explain that first. Give me a sentence explanation real quick.
Filming and photographing areas in the public or areas where there's no expected modicum of privacy.
I think mainly there's just no law against it. That's the main thing. There's nothing necessarily saying you have the right to do it, nor is there anything prohibiting it. So it's just your right, I guess.
Yeah, I would have to look into that because I think there's generally like some sort of constitutional amendment that it doesn't specifically cover photographing and filming, but it kind of covers the expectations of privacy. And I forgot which one it is. I think it may be the if I'm remembering correctly, the 14th Amendment, which somehow applies to like everything, like somehow, some way. But I'm not really sure on that. I have to go look. Anyways, with that, and also it's not the freedom of the press. I mean, you just kind of have a freedom to do whatever. And also the freedom of the press thing gets really convoluted because then a lot of people think you have to have like official press credentials. But the problem with that is that there's no official body that issues press credentials. So literally anyone could be the press. And on top of that, like the press is just sort of like this anonymous body. Like that's something that's always so funny to me is that people say we're not journalists running this channel. I mean, technically we are, because what the hell makes CNN a journalist? It's not like they went to official journalism, the publisher, and got a little badge that says I'm an official publisher, like on God, for real, for real. Like they are literally as legitimate as we are, like as far as like the qualifications or the licensing for it, because there's nothing out there actually that says these are the press and these are journalists and these aren't. There's no such thing as press credentials really, except for ones that companies make up for themselves to try and make themselves seem a little bit more serious. But anyways, with that,
Also, once somebody said one more thing, not to like rabbit hole in this too long. Sluggernaut said, "I have a right to stand my ground as a Florida citizen, and if someone comes up to me filming and I feel threatened, I have no duty to retreat, and I can deal with it as I feel fit." The first part's true. Like, yeah, the first part about you can stand your ground, that is true. But the last part about I can deal with it as I feel fit, that's actually not true. You can only protect yourself and defend yourself if you're assaulted or something. You can't just like start attacking a person with the camera because you feel like you don't like it. You can't do that. No, I recommend not doing that, because if you try that, the police are going to arrest you, charge you, and you'll probably get convicted of it. So don't do that. Like the stand your ground thing is for self-defense. Like if you're being attacked or assaulted or something, then you can defend yourself with appropriate force. Obviously, if someone's attacking you, like for example, if someone slaps you, you can't shoot the person in response. That's not appropriate, or it wouldn't be justifiable under most contexts, unless the person was like humongous or something. You're like a shrimp. It wouldn't be justifiable. So it's a little bit tricky there. Like Alabama has stand your ground as well, just like Florida, but it's a little bit tricky.
Dude, he says, "Stop filming me. I don't like your camera," and then pulls out like a 6-shooter and just blasts the guy in the street. It's like, no, you can't do that. Like the guy's not doing any crime. So if you stand your ground and then you hit the guy, you're actually committing battery at that point. You're attacking a guy who is doing a legally protected activity in the public. You had no expected modicum of privacy. Like, you can stand your ground and not like I don't even know how you would stand your ground in that kind of a situation, but it's not like someone's attacking you doing that. They're just filming you. So you're just kind of standing there, and then you're attacking someone who's doing nothing really, rather than filming. So that's kind of, to be entirely honest, that's how you end up getting arrested by the police and possibly get an aggravated battery charge for pulping a guy who was just filming the public with his camera, which he has a right to do. So
honestly, you got to be careful with the stand your ground thing and self-defense. Like everybody wants to run around saying, "Oh, I got the right to self-defense, and I'll do X, Y, and Z to so-and-so if they come up to me and do this and that and another." You got to be careful with that, because there's like a lot of nuances to that. It's not as straightforward as most people think. Some people are like, "Oh, if this person comes up, I'm just gonna like pull out my firearm and get them." It's like, it's like, that's it's debatable. Like if you end up in court and you're having to, be judged by 12 people, it's like some 12 people might not see it the same way you're seeing it, or they might not perceive the threat the way you perceived it. So honestly, like you only want to stand your ground and start defending yourself as last resort. If all possible. Not saying you shouldn't defend yourself. It's just a last resort. Like don't ever be too gung-ho to get in a brawl with somebody, because it could go sideways later if you end up in court.
Yeah, like honestly, even if you have a right to stand your ground, it's always the best to at least retreat if you can. Like if you cannot retreat and you're just kind of cornered, then standing your ground makes good sense. But if you really have an ability to retreat and you have an illegal right to stand your ground, and then you stand your ground and you just blast a guy right off the bat, that probably isn't going to look that good in court, because it's probably going to be pretty easy for a prosecutor to say, while he had the ability to stand his ground, he kind of instigated the situation to some point because he was trying to shoot the guy just because he wanted to. Like had an itchy trigger.
It's very
finger or whatever.
nuanced.
Yeah,
I always thought before I went to law school, for the brief time I was there, I always thought that it was straightforward. Like, for example, if someone walked up to your car window and, like, for example, you felt threatened and you started, firing at them or something, then it was just straightforward. You were good. Like, you just walked away. That's actually not the way it is. Like, there's a lot of tests that go into it, the analysis that goes into it and stuff. And it's definitely not straightforward. You don't want to end up in a position like that if you can avoid it. I would never recommend trying to find a situation like that and walking intentionally into it, because you probably won't end up good.
Yeah, like, and also, like, there has to be some sort of an actual perceived, like, not a perceived, but an actual imminent threat. Like, someone says, something like, I'm going to kill you, or I'm going to, beat the shit out of you, or they, start reaching in their pocket while they're saying that, and it looks like they're reaching for, like, a knife or a weapon. Then that's when stand your ground would come into play. But you really can't just sit there and have a guy come up to you and go, what's your problem, dude? And then you start beating his ass or you shoot him, because, it's going to be really hard to argue self-defense on a stand your ground doctrine off of that, because you really don't even know if the guy had the intent to come up and start walloping you or shoot you, because he never said anything to show that kind of intent, and he really didn't have that kind of intent. So it was really just escalating the situation. And honestly, at that point, it probably would end up being viewed as you were being the aggressor instead of the other guy, because you would be the one ending up throwing the first punch or shooting the first shot. And it would be unknown if the other party in that incident had any intent of causing you any kind of bodily harm at that point, for you to defend yourself from. So there's a lot of nuance to that sort of a thing, a lot more than a lot of people think. So it's best not to have the gung-ho policy of a Wild West gunslinger and think, I'm just going to blast anyone anywhere because I got to stand my ground. It's better to try and deal with it a little bit more level-headed and be like, if this looks like a tough situation, probably better to leave than act like I got a right to escalate this to where I have to shoot someone, because it's a very questionable thing how that would end up turning out in court. So with that, I hope that has addressed it. Well, actually, crazily enough, we've spent a good amount of time on that rabbit hole, but it is time for us to get on into some questions. So what do we got, Matthew?
Also, by the way, someone just tried to school me, by the way, saying, if you went to law school, you don't know what the First Amendment says about recording in public. The First Amendment says nothing about recording in public, by the way. So reread that again and then be back with me.
Hold up. Let's go to U.S. Constitution real quick. Oh, buddy. You see, the thing is that when they wrote the First Amendment, there was no such thing as a camera or a recording device. So it's really hard for them to include that in the First Amendment. So let me go get it. Oh, so they don't include the Bill of Rights attached. Okay, hang on.
I'm reading it right here. It's literally just one paragraph. It says freedom of speech of the press, the right to people to peacefully assemble, and to petition the government for redress of grievances. And the fellow just told me the first specifically covers filming and photos in public. No, it does not. I think it can be interpreted to cover that, but it does not specifically say anything about photos, videos, because like the enforcer said, it didn't even exist at the time they wrote it. So no, I'm afraid it doesn't say that, good sir. Go back and read it again. I'm not going to be rude to you, but you should go back and read it.
Let's just read it aloud for everyone to see on my screen. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Nowhere in that does it specifically say you can film and photograph. Like in specific exact wordage, it does not say that. It says there is a freedom of the press, and there's the Congress can make no law respecting the abridging of the freedom of speech or of the press. But it doesn't say anything about filming or photography. But, largely through courts' interpretation of the First Amendment, freedom of the press is included filming and photography. So,
yes, that's it. Someone said in the live chat, too, they said the Supreme Court ruled that the First Amendment allows filming. That is true. There was a Supreme Court ruling that said the freedom of the press meant that you had the right to go around and film in public. But that is not specifically stated in the First Amendment. That's a court ruling that became precedent, and it thus became basically law, which, that goes back to the original point. It's not written in the First Amendment. That's a precedent set by courts. So, it's not written in the First Amendment.
But I see some people trying to say, no, it's in the First Amendment. It's not in the First Amendment. It says abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. That's what it says. The court extrapolated out of that it includes filming and photography. That does not mean that that's included verbatim in the First Amendment. That's how the courts interpret it right now. The courts could easily interpret it the other way and say that no, filming and photography are not included in freedom of the speech or of the press. It could easily go the other way, because a lot of people don't know this, but the court has a pretty wide sweeping authority to largely decide or interpret what the Constitution and its amendments say. So, like, for example, back in the day, the Supreme Court used to say that it was perfectly fine to discriminate against people as long as it was separate but equal, largely. Some of y'all may remember that as Jim Crow policies here in the South. And somehow the Supreme Court back then interpreted that treating citizens equally regardless of their race meant that you could have separate facilities for them as long as they were somewhat equal, at least in some way, shape, or form, which a lot of people would agree today. That certainly seems to be a very weird interpretation of any of the constitutional amendments that came after the Civil War. But nevertheless, that's how they understood it at the time. And then that was reversed later on to say that that is entirely wrong, and you cannot have separate but equal facilities. The facilities have to provide for every race regardless from that point on. So once again, not included verbatim in the First Amendment, but largely interpreted by courts to understand that freedom of the speech and press includes filming and photography in a public area. That's largely how that works. Like now,
also, by the way, some people are saying it's actually illegal to record sound without consent. That's not true. The only instance I'm aware of where it's illegal to record sound is over a phone call. And that would be, for example, if you were on the phone with somebody and they weren't aware you were recording their phone call. In some jurisdictions, that's actually illegal to do that. But that's the only instance I know of that would be illegal to record sound. Because if you're in person, like with somebody and recording them, like in person, you're sitting in front of someone at a table or something, you're secretly recording them. To my knowledge, there's nothing illegal about that. That would be the same as secretly recording somebody. So there's nothing illegal about that necessarily. But, you know, I'm shocked. Like, a lot of people actually aren't familiar with the nuances of this stuff. Like, I'm not big into this, but I'm surprised how many people have like varying like perspectives on this. I'm really not sure what the law really says on the topic.
And also, like, not try to say that we're like a subject expert on this, but we did go to law school for at least a semester and a half each. And also, we grew up in a family where a dad was an attorney, which, you know, largely their job is to understand your legal rights. So we got spoon-fed this most of our lives. Not that, you know, I'm trying to say my daddy's a lawyer, but, you know, we generally grew up around this stuff, so we have a pretty decent handle on a good amount of it. You know, so that largely is how it works. Like for example, what the Second Amendment, because a lot of people act like constitutional rights are absolute. They are certainly not. It's really up to the interpretations of the court as to what your rights really are. So while the Second Amendment makes it pretty clear in just this one sentence, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Seems like a pretty simple thing, but then the courts get involved, and then it becomes, what is a well-regulated militia? Why is it being necessary to the security of a free state? The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, but infringed to what degree? Or what does that really mean? And then the courts have to figure all that out, and then they try and make a decision on it, and then the actual law of the land is not the Second Amendment verbatim, it's the Second Amendment added on to all of the Supreme Court opinions or the opinions of federal district courts or your state Supreme Court in state law instances that then starts to actually make the law shape up into something of being that actually is enforceable by law enforcement to uphold. That's largely how it works. So you have all three branches involved in it. You know, you have the Congress, which actually passes the amendment. You then have the judicial branch, the Supreme Court or other courts of a higher order, that then interpret what it means, and then the executive branch enforces the law by what originally was passed by the Congress, but also what the Supreme Courts or the Supreme Court or the higher courts in generally understand the law to actually mean. That's how it actually works in practice. So, you can't say
right.
Here. We keep, honestly, this is a fun one to go over because it's honestly fun to talk about how the U.S. really works. It's a fun thing to me. So maybe we're going on this a good bit. But I always like the Third Amendment, Matthew, because everyone kind of skips over that one because it literally has no bearing, hardly at all in the modern day at this point. But it's the quartering of soldiers.
Yeah, that's true. Without the consent of the owner during the time of the war, but in a manner prescribed by the law. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, very interesting one. But every other amendment, the first 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights, usually are covered a good bit, except for the 10th Amendment and the Third Amendment. And the 10th Amendment's probably the best one because nobody ever talks about it. But it says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Meaning, if it's
That's a damn important one right there.
yeah, this is a very important one that really no one ever talks about, is that this amendment actually says that if a power is not specifically given in the Constitution or subsequent amendments to the federal government, those powers are held by the states. And that's it. That's literally what this means. So it means pretty much everything else that was not specifically laid out in the Constitution is a power of the state governments instead. So this is a very important one here. And also, I like this one first. Filming and photography includes freedom of the press. You two are more like, it's like we actually just explained that in like the actual technical terms of how it works, and they were a little bit too dumb to get it. The literacy is showing on that one. It's like I guess they couldn't really. It's not really that they couldn't read; it's that they couldn't actually comprehend what was being said. But still, probably one of the glowing examples of the public education system at work, right there, folks. We literally explained that, and then they attacked us for explaining what we explained. Pretty cool. But beyond that, this is a great amendment right here, because people don't get it. But the power is actually supposed to be equally vested in the states along with the federal government. The federal government isn't supposed to run the show. It's only supposed to run a good bit of the show, but the states are still supposed to run half of it. And people just never get that. I don't know why, because it's like people don't even really care anymore about the gubernatorial elections or the elections for their state legislators or anything like that. People only care about the elections for the Congress, the federal Congress, and the office of the president. Those are the only elections people care about. Crazily enough, state elections are honestly more important because state laws actually do affect you on a daily basis pretty much all the time. Like, for example, gun control, like the two big things in this country, at least on a domestic political topic, which is gun control and abortion, largely those decisions are made at the state level and not the federal level. The federal level gets all of the action, but you'll actually see that states have wildly varying laws on what guns are allowed and not allowed, and if abortion is legal or not, and to what extent it is legal from state to state, instead of having some sort of an overarching federal level of legalities on that or not. And it's kind of a little bit interesting with that because people never realize how important their state elections actually are. Like, for example, the state of Alabama has practically no state laws in regards to firearm ownership. We pretty much just default to the basic bare minimum federal laws. Meanwhile, a state like Washington State has an absolutely insane amount of additional restrictions placed on top of the already existent federal laws on what kind of guns cannot be owned or what kind of munitions can be owned, such things like that. Or, for example, I think the state of Alabama and the state of Georgia's laws on abortion are entirely different as well. Once again, showing the importance of state legislators and state governorships and the actual laws that affect citizenry on a day-to-day basis. And so it's kind of a little bit interesting that people kind of overlook the importance of the states and their abilities to pass laws, and they always focus on the federal government, which is a very slow and cumbersome kind of a system that takes forever to have any real change happen in it. The real change usually happens at the state level instead of the federal level, which a lot of people end up overlooking a great deal. And it was actually structured to be that way.
Well, get this, not meaning to change topic here, but this is a piece of breaking news, actually. We've just gotten word via our channels here that the Philippine Marines, National Police, and Coast Guard forces landed on 3 contested South China Sea features, or islands, in the South China Sea, directly responding to recent Chinese Coast Guard landings aimed at asserting Beijing's sovereignty. And in response, the Chinese Coast Guard has declared that it, quote-unquote, dealt with the 6 Filipino personnel accused of unlawfully landing on the contested sandbank in the South China Sea. And remember, the Chinese just seized a Sankey Island, which was the property, I believe, of Vietnam, wasn't it? Correct?
I think so.
Yeah, it was the property of Vietnam. So apparently China, based on what they're saying, might have taken 6 Filipino personnel into custody that were responding to the seizure of the Vietnamese island. So that is very interesting to hear. It looks like the Filipinos actually went in to deal with the situation, and it looks like the Chinese have responded pretty forcefully by detaining them or arresting them, one or the other. So that is certainly interesting to hear. And for a second there, I was thinking maybe it was the Vietnamese that got arrested after they tried to go back and take their island back. But this was actually the Philippines going in and getting arrested.
I think that might actually be on different islands because the one that was contested by the Chinese is down in the Spratly Island chain, and I think that those you're talking about are up near the Scarborough Shoal, I think.
Right, but what they're doing here is they're trying to make a point. It's not just about their stuff, because of course China's taking issue with not just Vietnam, they're taking issues with the Philippines as well. They're trying to go back and basically retake some of these small little hopper islands to make a point to China that they're not going to tolerate it. And I think they're trying to act on behalf of Vietnam as well by sort of indirectly sending a message on their behalf. But it looks like that sort of backfired on them a little bit.
That's interesting to hear, actually. And I wonder what they mean by dealt with them, because it might not necessarily mean that they arrested them. It may mean that they fired on them and killed them and took some of them prisoner, possibly.
Maybe. It's not clear what they're saying. They simply say they, quote unquote, dealt with these 6 Filipino personnel. So they're really not sure what that even means. I doubt it means they shot them. Like, I'd be shocked if they actually shot at them. Excuse me, goodness. But I would believe that they probably got arrested or detained.
That's pretty wild either way. Regard your cough is contagious, Matthew, but that's wild either way, and thank you for sharing that breaking news. But nevertheless, we've rabbit holed a long time on constitutional rights and what they mean and how they're interpreted. I hope you all enjoyed this short civics class. How in the hell am I having a harder time speaking English these days? I hope you all enjoyed this late night civics class that we had here on the stream, but nevertheless, we want to actually get to answering some of y'all's questions after that little breaking news update. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and also big shout out to Danny B, by the way. Danny B just threw in an $80 super chat and helped to bring us up to $3,475 raised on the fundraiser, and we do appreciate it, Danny, and thank you very much for being here on the live stream once again and helping us to reach way over the goal, and we do appreciate that, Danny. And we are now moving on to our Morse code decoders of the stream. Tonight, we had Cliff Sampson, Mark Hodges, Earl Benu, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, Her Royal Fluffiness, Arabelle Garbo, Joni Dog, and Norm Pritchett. They said the Morse says for tonight, North Korea officially joins the Ukraine war, and total war is about to begin in India, LLT LSA, and what a worldwide mess.
And that is the sound of money. Y'all got that down on the nail. That is the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate y'all greatly once again for getting that correct, because if it wasn't for y'all, no one would be able to know what the Morse code message was every single night, day in and day out. So a huge congratulations to y'all. And with that, it's time for us to move on into some questions. So what do we got, Matthew? What do we got?
All right, so the first one here goes to David Tablet, who said, why the heck is the mainstream media not reporting anything about any of these events with such global importance?
I don't really know. I honestly say it's because they just suck and they really don't know what they're doing. They cover domestic political topics like it's a life and death matter, but the reality is that there's a lot going on in the world that honestly is far more intriguing than domestic politics could ever be. I don't know. It's a really hard thing to say, because with what North Korea did today, I would feel like that would be making the rounds on mainstream news sources, and yet it didn't. And the whole, Pakistan and India are about to go to war thing would be pretty big news. I will bet you this, though. I will bet you that the mainstream news will cover the India-Pakistan war once it moves from a border war into a full-on total war. Once it does that, the day it does that, I bet you it will be on the news. And they will be sitting there and trying to catch up, and they'll be going, this war just broke out. Why don't we have kumbaya? Peace is so good. Or something like, they won't even know what the hell they're talking about. They won't have even followed the preamble to the full total war in the border war that's happening right now. It's honestly mainstream news is just such a sham, and all those hosts, people act like they actually have some intelligence and know what they're talking about. I think the best examples against that on both sides would be Andrew Cuomo for someone who leans to the left, and then Tucker Carlson for someone who leans to the right, because both of those people just say whatever makes them the most money, and both of them hardly have any actual clue of what they're talking about. They just say whatever gets them paid, and these people that are covering the news, they have absolutely no understanding of what they're even talking about. They have a team of writers that actually tell them what their speaking points are going to be, and then they just repeat those speaking points. Unlike us, because we don't have a team of writers, we actually have to come up with what we're saying and think about what the answers or decisions should be. and then we come on to air and say that. That's why I just absolutely loathe mainstream news, and that's honestly why I love to see that we had a peak viewership of 16,000 people here tonight, because that's 16,000 people who were on here live that weren't getting fed raw garbage. Also, yeah, it is Chris Cuomo, not Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo was the governor of New York. Chris Cuomo was the guy on CNN. So thank you for correcting that frivolous activities.
I guess they didn't say what they really needed to say to stay employed because they both got fired in the end.
Yeah, but I'll say this, with varying degrees of success. Chris Cuomo went on to be like on a C-list like news show thing. I forgot what it was. And then yeah, news station. And then Tucker Carlson went on just to be a traitor. So it's like I don't really know which one's better. Because like y'all know, like I used to think that maybe Tucker Carlson was just a pro-Russian, but now like just to put this out there, because this is the most confusing thing about this idiot, is that now Trump is moving towards, like, just to say it a little bit clearly, now Trump's moving towards possibly bombing Iran. So y'all know what he did? He didn't back up Trump on that. He actually went against Trump. He's like, why does the deep state want to bomb Iran? It's like, because they're making nuclear bombs. It's like, that's why. Like, it's a very open and shut kind of a case. And he's going around acting like it's some kind of a mystery, like an idiot. Like, what are you laughing at, man? Oh my God.
I'm just trying to get over it, man. I said it earlier. I said News Nation is where Chris Cuomo went to. You said, yeah, news station.
Oh, dude.
I don't know. I was getting a kick out of that, but go ahead.
Dude, you said it like a murmur, bro. You're like, news. I was like, yeah, news station. Like, I was like, yeah, yeah, you went to the news station.
Oh.
But anyways, like, Tucker Carlson is either just a contrarian for the sake of it, which I don't think there's really such a thing as that, or he is a traitor to the United States. And I'd largely go with the latter rather than the former, that the guy is just a traitor. Because how in the world does he have the opinion every single time that goes blatantly in violation of American interests? It's just absolutely crazy to me with that. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next question goes to Marion Deemert, who says, could North Korea send a nuke to Ukraine? It makes me worry that fat man is so demented and makes me very worried.
And can you reread that one again?
They said, could North Korea send a nuke to Ukraine, meaning like launch one at Ukraine? And the fat boy is so demented, it makes me really worried.
He could do it. They actually do have the range for that, but I'd highly doubt that they ever would do such a thing. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And we are on to the next one.
Excuse me. And our next one here goes to, let's see, Alan Works, who said, if North Korea sends its troops to the meat grinder, will it make it easier for South Korea to invade North Korea?
Probably not, because North Korea still has a nuclear deterrent, so it would still be as difficult. It's just that North Korea would be easier to defeat conventionally, but still would be pretty impossible to defeat them in a nuclear conflict. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Avari. Wait a minute. Hold on. Let's see here. I think I got one mixed up. Let's see. I'll have to return back to that one after I figure out what happened to it. It put my live chat question in the wrong spot. But this one goes to Alt History. You said, do you think it's possible for European nations to send troops as a counter to North Korean support as a show of force?
It's not really that easy to do that, because if they do, they're becoming active belligerents in the war in Ukraine on the side of Ukraine. And it's a lot easier for Russia to lash out at Europe for doing that than it would be for Ukraine and Europe to lash out at North Korea for joining the conflict. So they could, but it would be a lot more difficult in practice to achieve the same results that the North Koreans are achieving by joining the war on the side of Russia, like in a practical kind of a way of actually gaming out the war. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Knox Date, who said, with every part of the global getting ready for the war, in your guys' opinion, how close are we until World War III starts? Or what's the final step to make it happen?
I would say that we're either months or years away from World War III at this point. Like, we generally have always been one to say it's not going to be World War III, but at this point, it's kind of getting a little hard to deny. I would say we're probably months at the worst case scenario, or years in the best case scenario, away from World War III if nothing starts to change at this point. That would be my assessment. But Matthew, what do you think? What do you think?
World War III, that's a tough one, because it seems like if you predict World War III, you're a fearmonger. And then if you ignore the fact that World War III is looming around the corner, then you're naive. So either way you go with that one, it's always a little bit tricky. But if I'm being perfectly honest, and I really don't care how it's perceived, World War III is imminent at this point. I'm not trying to be a fearmonger here, but it's imminent. But of course, it's always been imminent. World War III is something that was always going to happen at some point, but nobody knew when it was going to happen. But considering the fact that the entire world is starting to go to war by nature, it's going to end up in a world war. So the Pakistan-India situation popping off out of nowhere. Also, China's been once again threatening Taiwan and all the Philippines and Vietnam. That's been popping off severely. We now have North Korea sending troops and officially getting involved in the war between Russia and Ukraine. We have the Middle East going into absolute hell and chaos, like it always likes to do. Just hell everywhere. It's just breaking out all over the place. I'm sure there'll be something else breaking out next that's unheard of and unseen, and it's just getting out of control. And nobody wants to calm down. That's the big thing. Everybody's just running out of control. It's like nobody wants to put the brakes on it. Everybody's like, okay, if Russia and Ukraine are fighting, we can fight too. And we're going to get it going even worse than that because we can even be nastier. It's like, that's probably not the best thing right now because once you start a spark in the room, it's going to cause the entire room to ignite. And I think that's where we're heading right now. So on the timeline, I would personally say we're probably a couple years out from it. I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, but we're probably a couple years out from something really drastic happening because world wars don't happen overnight. It's a gradual process, and it takes months, if not years, to work right into it. But the Ukraine war was probably the start of it. That'll probably be historically known as the start of World War III. And we've been working into it for several years now. And I think we're starting to get to the point where there's going to be an inflection point probably over the next year or year and a half.
I would agree on that. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Exo Cypher, who said, what kind of effects do you think we are likely to see with the conflict in India, and how might it affect U.S. actions in the Middle East?
There won't really be a direct impact on U.S. actions in the Middle East. They're pretty much like two different ecosystems of a sort, at least at this point. Might end up meshing into one. But for right now, they're two separate ecosystems because we're not really involved in the India-Pakistan situation. But as far as it may affect things globally, it may start to affect global shipping, especially if the Pakistan Navy is able to break out into the Arabian Sea and start attacking major Indian ports. We may actually see that it becomes pretty difficult for the Indians to export consumer goods that are being produced inside their country, which may start to cause some limited stock market crashes around the world and also some scarcity of certain kinds of consumer goods that were produced in India, which largely are textiles. So there may be an increase in prices of some clothing products that are currently being produced in India, along with some other limited varieties of electronics. So that might end up being a bit of an issue. It wouldn't be that big of an issue, though, because once again, India is a rising manufacturing and industrial power. It's not a firmly planted one like China, which still is the largest global manufacturer on Earth, but India is getting there little by little. But beyond that, I hope that does address that at least the best I can as far as the impact to all of us out here in the wide world would be on that kind of a situation. And also another thing I got to throw out there, because people may not know this. Let's see, largest industrial nations. Let's see here. Let me see if I can show you this. This is something that I always find quite interesting here. Quite interesting. So here are the top 10 manufacturing countries in the world. And this is something that a lot of people just never realize. But America is still handily number 2 in the world for an industrial power. We produce 15% of all manufactured goods in the world still. And the only country that comes close to us in third place is Japan at 6%, which is nearly 3 times smaller in manufacturing power than we are. It's actually crazy to think about that, Matthew, that the United States still produces such a large amount of stuff. But China is number 1 at nearly 30% of all global manufacturing being produced inside of China. So a little bit interesting with that. But India is getting there. India is actually just a little bit behind South Korea, at least according to this graph, and I don't know what year it was made in, because I think by this point, India may have superseded South Korea and is heading towards taking Germany's spot soon. But eventually, we're expecting that India actually will become the next China, at least in terms of global manufacturing output, and probably will start to surpass the United States within the next 15 to 20 years. But still, a really unique thing, because people don't look at global manufacturing like this. People look at global manufacturing as like this doomer thing, Matthew. You know what I'm talking about, where people are like, oh, the manufacturing jobs in America are gone, and they never think about like they're really not all gone. Like a lot of them are gone, but not all of them, because we're still the second largest industrial power on Earth.
Yeah, we still make plenty of stuff. It's just not like it used to be. I think that's the main thing that people are talking about when they say that. They're talking about what we used to be versus what we are now, and that's what they're saying. There's been a decline, but overall, though, I mean, we still are huge, as the chart reflects.
Yeah, it's like there are a lot of things that left, like a lot of the automotive manufacturers. But then again, though, that's kind of like not really true, because it's like, yeah, the automotive manufacturers left Detroit, but they didn't really leave the country entirely per se, because like, for example, right here, this is a Honda assembly plant right outside of Talladega, or the Talladega Speedway. Remember, we actually saw that one, Matthew, when we were landing in Birmingham. Pointed out to you, I was like, oh look, there's the Honda factory, and there's Talladega Speedway right there too. And then there's also some other major manufacturers as well in the area. Like, I think there's one up here. No, that's like a lumber thing. There's one down south of Montgomery. That's a Hyundai plant right here. But there's
a Mercedes plant up near Tuscaloosa.
Let's see here. I think this is the one. Yeah, here's the Mercedes-Benz plant right here out of Tuscaloosa. But there is an insanely large amount of automotive manufacturers that still are in America. It's just that a lot of them moved to the South because the labor was cheaper in the South, because we didn't have the centuries-old labor union sort of hamstringing that was going on with the pay and the labor. So the labor was cheaper, so a lot of those companies ended up moving here, or they ended up moving to, say, a place. Well, not really any of them moved to China when you think about it, Matthew. Like, not really a lot of automotive manufacturers moved to China. A lot of them ended up moving to Mexico, or they ended up moving here into the southern United States.
Yeah, I think they had to be somewhat close, but I don't think going to China would have been sustainable for like automotive parts. I think that would have been a bit too far.
Yeah, that's true. Also, man, look at this, man. They got the auto rack loading area down here for the auto racks. That's pretty cool. We actually saw an
How's it
auto
always
rack.
come back to trains every time?
Because, man, trains are freaking everywhere, man. People don't think about them, but they're literally everywhere. Like up here in Birmingham, dude. Because what's crazy, dude, is that one of those little auto rack cars, or a couple of them here, will be loaded with those Mercedes cars and vans that are made here, and they are going to end up in this yard right here, to be loaded onto an 18-wheeler in the middle of the hood, and then they will drive that 18-wheeler out here. Where is that? Here we go. Right out here to this Mercedes-Benz, and they're going to drop off a couple of those cars right there.
That is fascinating, I will say.
That actually is neat when you think about it, man, like how that works. Like, there's literally a factory just a couple of dozen miles from here that may actually build some of the cars that are up for sale right now at this dealership right now.
Oh yeah, well I can tell you the models I believe they make here are the SUVs. They make the GLE class, or the I think it's called GLE class. I'm not huge like Mercedes fanatic, so I really don't know all the models, but it's like the GLE, the GLC, and like a couple of their SUV models they manufacture near Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, so, some of them will end up here and will be sold here at this Mercedes dealership, which is actually pretty neat to think that they're that close to the source. But of course, Matthew, the most important underlying current is that the railroad is involved in some way, shape, and form, because our national transportation system is interconnected between sea, road, and rail in every single aspect of it. Really kind of a cool thing. And also, man, what's even cooler, man, is that the coal that, we saw today, I was like, oh, look, a coal train. Like, that coal maybe came from a coal mine just right out here in western Alabama, and is going to be taken down to, say, let's see here, where is Gaston? Right here, the Ernest C. Gaston plant. They roll up hundreds of these loaded hoppers, and then they roll them right over this thing right here, drop all the coal out from the bottom of them, and then they feed them into these turbines, and that creates the electricity that we use to run our stream right now. It's all a circular kind of a thing.
I like it how it's circular like that. It's like a circle of accountability.
Yeah, a circle of accountability, a whole of government approach. But nevertheless, it is time for us to move on, I think, to the second to last question of the night.
Yes, this one goes to Brittany Coy, who said, but what would have to happen for it to be declared World War III? In my opinion, the one thing that could happen that would be like an instant, like, okay, World War III has started. If China or Russia attack a NATO country and Article 5 is initiated, that would be, in my opinion, that would be pretty safe to say this is definitely World War III at this point. Outside of that, though, it would be a little bit gray area. Like, for example, if China attacks Taiwan, a little bit of gray area. If Russia goes and attacks a non-NATO country, a little bit of gray area. But if a NATO country is attacked by either China or Russia, that's World War III, in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree with Matthew. That's when we know that World War III would have certainly kicked off. as if a major power like China and a major alliance like NATO go to war with each other. World War III has happened at that point. So with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And we are on to the final question of the night. And so who was the last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
So that viewer is going to be, I'm looking through here to get the best last question. There's a lot of good questions left in here, but let's see here. Let's see here. How we ban this person here? Like, they just I warned them a minute ago about like putting all these political and religious discussions in here, and they kept going anyway. And so I guess there's no free speech. I guess that we are. I guess you weren't taught
Free
to be,
speech is dead.
Stuff,
Free speech is
kind
dead.
and friendly, and also polite. But anyway, moving on to our last question of the night here. This one goes to. I'm still looking. I'm having a hard time here. Clink, clink, I'm a tank. They said, since Russia never declared war, does this mean they will enable them to deploy Russian conscripts to be deployed to Ukraine?
Most likely not, because the president of Russia, which is called Vladimir Putin, he promised the public that he would never use conscripts in the war, so they're probably not going to use them in mass ever, because that may meet public outrage for the large part. So I would largely say no, even in this kind of a degree. But nevertheless, I hope that does address that well. And we've reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank all of y'all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to have all of y'all here watching. And I got to say, what a stream it was. We had 122,000 people watch this stream from beginning to end, and had a peak viewership tonight of 16,000 people live. Did not expect those kinds of numbers coming into tonight. We never really know what to expect with the numbers, because the things that get people watching the show are the darndest things. Like, North Korea has been involved in the war for about 8 months now, like, is pretty much officially. But when they officially declare war, then people are really interested in it. Like, it's really interesting how that works sometimes. But beyond that, we're still happy to be here, and we're still happy to be the ones that were able to report that news to all of y'all. And if y'all were here for the first time tonight and you did enjoy it, make sure to subscribe. We're literally only 5 subscribers away from hitting 346,000 subscribers. We're really close, folks. We're really close. And so if you hit that subscribe button, please, by all means do. We would love to see you be the 346,000 subscriber, while the Hot Dog Man finally hit 70K. Long time coming, as he said, and it finally happened after a year and a half of being at 69,000. Crazy, right? But nevertheless, thank you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 48 hours of news from around the world. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die. And also, one more thing, a big shout out to everyone for raising $3,485 here on this incredible Sunday fundraiser night for Nova Ukraine. But with that, I'm going to let Matthew say his farewells, and then we will get off for the night.
And yes, indeed, huge shout out to everybody once again for helping us to reach well above the fundraising goal. We're about almost $1,000 above it, and it's only thanks to the LSA that happens every single Sunday, and that is no small feat. I know of no other channel consistently raising money like that every single Sunday, and it's only because of the folks in the LSA, like I said, for making that possible. So once again, huge shout out to all y'all for making that possible, and I've said that 3 times now, so I'm going to actually move on to the next thing. But we will also be running a show on Tuesday night, not tomorrow. We're off on Monday if you're new to the channel. We don't run a show on Monday. We'll be running one on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern, and it will be covering all the news and events of that day and Monday as well on that stream. And also, we might have a short war video tomorrow midday if there is enough news to cover, but that's an iffy one. Just stay tuned for that. But once again, folks, thank you all for watching, and Slava Ukraine, Heroem Slava, get some rest, and good night.